Thank you all for being here this morning. As a reminder, please do silence your cell phones so that we can hopefully avoid, although we'd love some donations from the Wildlife Fund. Let's do a roll call. Commissioner Bell.
Here.
And alert and awake and all that good stuff. He already got into those cookies, yeah. Commissioner Haskell. Commissioner Jolovich.
Here.
Commissioner Mai.
Here.
Commissioner Masterson.
Here.
And Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
Thank you, gentlemen. Members of the public who wish to address the commission on any agenda item, please fill out a comment form located at the registration table and hand it to one of the department staff who will then forward it up front. Assisting with the meeting today is Hannah Smith from the Laramie region. Thank you, Hannah, for your help. If you are participating via Zoom, you should have submitted an advanced comment form prior to the start of the meeting. If you would still like to comment on an agenda item, please contact the host of the meeting. As we work through the agenda this morning, the public will have opportunity to address the commission. And to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, and as a courtesy to others, please do limit your time. And commissioners and those that are at the podium, please know that the mic is on when it is red. And so make sure that you push the button there. And that is officially the last time I have to go through that spiel. Yay, raw. So, all right, let's go ahead. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam President, there's one, if I get one point of order before we start the meeting today.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I think Commissioner Masterson has something to say to Commissioner Roberts today on the record.
Well, that's a fun way to start.
Madam President, thank you for the nudge, Commissioner Roberts. You were right, completely right,
Oh, wow.
100% right, in that the most valuable sports franchise on the face of the earth is in fact the Dallas Cowboys, not, as I thought, the New York Yankees. And Madam President, this was a source of much discussion last night. And I told him that my fellow commissioner that I would duly, publicly apologize for my misstatement and for questioning his integrity and his knowledge. And I am deeply and personally sorry, Commissioner Roberts, and I hope somehow you will dig deep and find it within the well of your soul to forgive me for ever doubting.
Amen. All
I'll
right,
try
well, we
hard.
got that officially on the record. Maybe we could all get a recording of that later to play back when needed.
Maybe somehow.
Oh my gosh, we have tears. Well, Commissioner Roberts, do you have a response to that?
Nothing that anybody doesn't know about America's team, huh, Rusty? Thank you, Commissioner Masterson, for that heartfelt apology. And I'll duly note whether I accept it or not. I don't know, but we'll see.
I missed one dinner and it goes to pot.
Yep.
All right, well, I'm glad we got that out of the way and taken care of. Further evidence of why these gentlemen sit at opposite ends of the commission table, so.
That's why we must have adults.
And we have adult supervision at all times, yeah. All right, Alan, let's jump right in before this gets even more out of hand. And talk about something that will make both of these gentlemen happy. Fishing.
Good morning, President Lundvall, Commissioners, Director Bruce. I'm Alan Osterlin, Chief of Fisheries, and this morning I just got a short presentation on the Spies Cool and Warm Water Project for you. The process where we're at. As you might recall, back in July, I believe it was, the Commission directed us to go out for bids on the project, try to get some numbers for you. How we started was with a request for qualifications process, and we got 5 submissions from contractors. After the team thoroughly reviewing that, we invited 3 contractors to bid. So those contractors are currently working on the bids, which are due February 19th. Yesterday, we had a pre-bid meeting in Casper. They met at the Casper office and went over the plans with the contractors and subcontractors. There was about approximately 50 people there. So that's pretty encouraging. And then they went out to the facility at Spies and walked around and answered any questions they might have. Sounds like it went well. And really no questions that were from left field that they might have missed. So that's encouraging as well. After we receive the bids, we'll thoroughly analyze them and we'll get them to you at the March commission meeting. Other efforts that the team has been doing is a cost savings effort. They're looking at bidding a majority of the equipment or a bunch of equipment that they can purchase directly from the suppliers. That'll be a cost savings instead of having the markup that is usually incurred from going through a contractor. The equipment will be purchased by the department and then will be installed by the contractor. And we'll have that piece of the puzzle to you as well in March. The team will be looking at meeting with Natrona County building code officials in the next couple of weeks to better understand the project, what we'll need for building permits. And we want to get on that early so they can gather more information how their process works and the overall timing of the county reviews and plans. Then the team will be meeting late next week with McMillan to fine tune the roles and responsibilities for construction oversight. There will likely be some things that the engineering firm can't do, for example, material testings during construction. So they want to make sure that they're plugging all those holes as well. So in short, the plan is still to have the project review and bids for you all at the March meeting. So that's where we're at with the process, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on that if I can, or any review of the project or feasibility study or engineering or anything like that that you might have.
I was just being proactive.
Thank you, Madam President, but I think I don't have anything to ask right now. I'm just curious to see what comes in March. Curious and scared to see what comes in March.
All right. Any other?
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Any other
Thank you.
questions or comments from the commission? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You get to stay.
Actually,
You should have just run.
this is just, I don't know if you've pursued, if I may, Madam President. The only state local government that monitors for invasive species is the department. And something like, what, 8 million a year is all we're able to spend on it. Have you thought about any other funding sources from governmental entities, state, local, that might kick in a little something in the interest of keeping zebra mussels out of their water treatment systems, out of their industry, out of power plants, things like that? I'm not asking if you've done any of that. I'm just, has that been part of the calculus?
So President Lundvall, Commissioner Masterson, appreciate you bringing that up because that's something that from the program's inception, the AIS program, we've really tried to leverage where we could, and our team is pretty dang good at getting federal grants to fill those gaps. From the state and local, You know, when we do presentations, like for instance, when I go to the Wyoming Water Association, do presentations, I usually do it on aquatic invasive species, and there's always an interest there. They get the infrastructure concerns and risks. But to date, no one's really been able to leverage any funds for us on that. So it's something that we continually working on, and I think that, like yourself, bringing it up at the commission meeting, anytime we can get any airtime on it and keep that message going. I know that when we had the moss ball debacle a few years ago, where it's an aquarium product that potentially could be flushed down and go into our water treatment systems or our wastewater treatment systems, and then into perhaps the Platte. That got a lot of concern out there, and people were really asking a lot of questions and wanted to learn more, but we didn't get anything out of that.
And I guess part of the rationale for asking that is that if we come in May and look at bids, I'm anticipating, I guess I would assume you would be saying, well, do you want to do this or not in March? So I don't know if it's, as a practical matter, possible to get any commitments or any discussions going with any municipalities or anything in that short period of time, but yeah, it's definitely, I would think everybody's got skin in the game, they just don't realize it yet. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ben.
All right, Madam President, Director Bruce, I have a fun presentation this morning talking about the department's fishing challenges, and Wayne is on it. So this was just an informational presentation on department has some fishing challenges and some of them been around a long time, some are newer. It's just they're pretty well subscribed, and I just wanted to give you an overview on that. I can.
Might need to turn it on the side.
Green. All right, we got power. So we got, like I mentioned, we got 4 fishing challenges. The reason for them are designed to increase participation, whether that's be retention or recruitment. One of them is to highlight native cutthroat trout species. Another one's to recognize fishing accomplishments. Another one's to promote youth participation, and another one's to highlight in-stream flow filing segments. That's a friend of mine's boy out at Diamond. Caught his first trout out there. Pretty fun. I might mention I caught that brown trout. 4 fishing separate challenges. There's the cut slam, extreme angler, youth fishing challenges, and master angler. We'll start out with the cut slam. That's the oldest. And Ron Remick was a fisheries biologist from the department from 1978 to 2002, and he was taken from us all too young. He was a passionate advocate for cutthroat trout, and it was his brainchild, developed program to encourage anglers to learn about cutthroat trout and develop an appreciation for management to maintain these species. So the program structure is catch 4 of the native cutthroat species in their native ranges: Yellowstone, Snake River, Colorado, Bonneville. Some people refer to it as bear as well. Then you receive a certificate, which are, I think, pretty cool. And then, back in 2018, 19, somewhere in there, we collaborated with Trout Unlimited to design these medallions that are issued with a certificate, and also they get a pretty cool sticker that goes with it. So last year, 2025 was a record-breaking year. Since 1996, the inception of the program, we've have 2,766 anglers complete the slam. Previous record was in 2020 when everybody was trying to get outside, and it was 200. And last year we had 210 anglers. It's a really popular program. We've had anglers from 3 countries, 49 states have completed the slam. I think it was back in, I can't remember, 2021. My niece or my nephew and his wife came out from Michigan, and they wanted to complete the slam, and they started out in Yellowstone, and then they went to the Snake, and they got their Yellowstone up there, and then their Snake on the Snake. And then I met them at the Tri-Basin area in up there in Commissioner Roberts' backyard. One of the cool things about the program is that it gets people out and highlights some of these tremendous areas that we have for fishing and just wildlife viewing, and that's one of those areas. And it was really cool to hear them squeal when they finally got their Colorado and their Bonneville, and made my heart hurt my heart well, mostly because there's a lot of pressure put on a family member when they're guiding. Then we have the Extreme Angler program, and I think that is it's been around since 2012. Fished 3 different streams, influent flow segments, and you can get a hat. It's currently being updated. Sydney McAndrews had put in for a worth of watching grant for $3,500, and probably in March they'll do a rollout with it, but it's going to be kind of the program is going to be kind of modeled after the Master Angler program, where you have 3 different levels. First level is currently where it's at, 3 different segments. You don't have to catch fish, you just have to fish it. And then the second one is if you fish 10 of the segments, you get a hat. And then third is if you fish 20, you get a medallion.
Madam President, for the benefit of Commissioner Roberts, I noticed that it says you fish 3 different segments. You don't have to catch anything. You just have to fish, Commissioner Roberts, just so you know.
I've never not caught fish. I don't know what you're talking about.
I feel like I'm a principal here and at home. Yes.
So youth challenges, these are my favorite. You know, we get these pictures, you have to submit a picture, the kids do, and you get pictures like this that you get to review. Unfortunately, I don't get to review them all, but some of our folks do, and Jessica certainly liked to, and she showed me pictures, and these are really cool. That's a great photo right there. So you've got there's 6 different challenges for the kids. Cowboy chase, catch 2 native species like burbot, channel cats, sauger, shovelnose, stone cats, or whitefish. The cool catch, very clever names on all these. Catch 2 crappie, pike, or smallmouth, or perch. We did include smallmouth on this one, Commissioner Roberts. Pond pair, target at warmer waters, bluegill, largemouth. Trout trio, as you can indicate, catch any one of the sports fish of the trout species, kokanee, rainbows, brookies, you can get that. And then habitat counts, 3 different habitats: beaver ponds, lakes, reservoirs, rivers, or streams, and they can get the habitat counts. Hatchery hop, hit 4 different hatcheries, just visit them, they can accomplish that one. And then the champion angler, complete 5 of the 6 challenges. So, and then they get a certificate similar to the cut slam. So pretty cool program. And then lastly, Master Angler, it rolled out in 2019. It recognizes the catch of trophy-sized fish. It's the most popular of the challenges. We've awarded over 7,862 of those in 2025. The team that rolled this out did a lot of analytics and coming up with size ranges of trophy. And some of them are easier to get than others. But certainly folks really like it, and we get a lot of positive feedback on this program. And there's 24 species that you can qualify for, 3 different levels. Master Anglers, 1 species. If you get 5, it's trophy. Like Master Angler, you get a certificate, and trophy, you get a medallion, and you get stickers as well for both of those. And then ultimate, 10 different species, you get a plaque. And 10 species, that's a lot of fishing in my mind. It's hard to come in. And there's no time limit. You can do it over the course of years, but we've had at least one person that's done it twice already. And I just wanted to give you a little example of a certificate where, I issued that from myself to myself. Funny story, I had that and some of my Master Angler catches on the fridge out in the garage, and finally my kids had enough of it. Said, "Dad, you got to do something about those. You're just such a dork." I had those letters from myself to myself. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Madam President, did great stuff. Can't beat it. It's really good stuff. I mean, I was in a different state, and then they had one of the certificates on the cut slam on there. It was in a fly fishing store, and they had it in a place of prominence with your name duly attached. And so it was a proud moment for the state of Wyoming, I thought. Thank you. So great programs, anything to get everybody out and out to enjoy our beautiful outdoors in Wyoming. It's great. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Anyone? All right, thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Morning. There we go.
Good morning, Madam President, Director Bruce, members of the commission, Justin Binfit, Deputy Chief of Wildlife. I'm here this morning to talk to the commission about the department's plans to adopt a multi-year season setting program. And I will also wait till the presentation's up. I do anyway. So what do we mean by multi-year season setting? It is just what the name implies. It's essentially establishing our hunting regulations for multiple years at a time rather than annually. So just to begin, to kick this off, I kind of want to recap a few things. First, our current formal season setting process, but also just would like to remind everybody, including the commission, that as we always say, and we try to really stress this through the April presentations, et cetera, is that season setting really is a year-round process for the department. It never really ends. Our department personnel, our field folks, all the way up to Director Bruce's level, are constantly taking input from the public, from landowners, outfitters, all of our constituents, whether, a biologist at a gas station in Saratoga, folks coming into the Casper office, it just never ends. And so we're constantly taking input from the public on how we do things and what they would like to see. We also, when we're out doing fall hunting season patrols, check stations, those sorts of things, that gives us a tremendous opportunity to get feedback from the public. So we take that public feedback that we constantly get, and we do roll that into in terms of how we formulate our thoughts when it comes to setting seasons. But I do want to go through I guess just the current formal process, just to kind of give a little bit of indication of just how intensive it actually is. So basically it starts in December and we're talking about a 5-month process from early December. So come early December, we have to identify some changes that we need to make to our hunt planner that a lot of folks use. When you see the term ELS, that refers to our electronic licensing system. So that's basically the application portal that folks use. We make license type changes periodically that we know are going to happen. We have several coming just this year, in fact. If we have hunt area boundary changes that went through the formal process the prior spring with public notification, we then make those to the hunt planner. And say if a hunt area is added or subtracted, we have to update that ELS accordingly for folks to begin the application process January 1. Then we also have to identify major changes that we know we want to propose to the public. These are typically vetted a year in advance, but let's think of things like converting an area from general to limited quota or limited quota to general. The elk area 7 changes that were proposed at this past April commission meeting where there's a split season, just those major changes. And when we do have those major changes, we have to include those in what we call the statement of reason or statement of reason for each regulation. And that is well, I guess I'll just leave it at that. So that is what then informs our initial draft regulation that comes out in January. So when folks see that initial draft here coming up very shortly, they'll see some changes that we're already proposing. So that requires some thought well in advance. And then as we get into January and February, our field managers are finishing up a lot of aerial survey work. A lot of our elk surveys occur in January, February. A lot of our mule deer siteability surveys, those are those surveys where we attempt to count every deer and adjust for those that we miss. Those occur during the winter months. Then you couple that with that's when our harvest survey really starts to come in. And so the season setting process for the biologist really kicks off in earnest in terms of the intensive work when those harvest survey data start to come in. So first pronghorn, then deer, then elk. We compile all that data. We then enter that data, the biologists do, I should say, enter that data into their population models. Those models go through an internal review process. The harvest data also gets incorporated, and then any of that classification data, that sex and age composition data from our aerial surveys or any population, abundance estimates that we get from those siteability surveys, that all gets incorporated. Then the models are produced, and then the initial season recommendations start to come from the field. And they start with biologists and game wardens, then they get vetted up through the regional wildlife management coordinator and the regional wildlife supervisor. Then they come to the wildlife division administration, and we review those in March. And this step also entails biologists developing draft season proposals. We give them the option to conduct their herd unit objective reviews during the spring process. They can do that in March, or they can also do it in May, depending on the nature of that objective review. We then revise, once all those proposals from the field come to us in the middle of March, we revise those draft regulations it's a revised draft that comes from Aaron Kerr and Stephanie White. We then publish that. It's usually in mid-March, and we try to do it at least a day in advance of when the first public meeting is. Then we have our public meetings in late March. That's when our field folks are actually putting up formal game and fish proposals. We then, in the meantime, the public comment period was open back in February. But then we take public comment through the end of those March meetings. And then in early April, then we circle back up, and based on all that public comment, we then review it and determine which changes we think we need to make subsequent to public comment. We then, we don't put out another revised draft for the public, but we do revise our draft regulations that ultimately goes to the commission prior to the April meeting. So Then, once the commission approves seasons in April, the last real piece that we need to do is we need to ensure that we update our hunt planner and that electronic licensing system with the appropriate license type changes, hunt area boundary changes, whatever it may be. And then we try to then notify, well, not try to, we notify our applicants of significant changes. So for example, if we had a really significant change and we had folks applying for a license that no longer exists or things like that, we do a targeted email or outreach effort to notify them. So that's a really, really brief nutshell. But I guess the point that I really want to illustrate is that it's a very intensive process. It's very deadline driven. There's just an awful lot of work that goes into it. It's also a very important function of the agency. We're wildlife managers. So why am I up here today? So why do we want to improve this process? I want to stress that no one internally thinks the current process is broken. We're not trying to fix anything. Just we'd like to think of this as rather we're trying to improve things. So we've had longstanding internal interest in going to a multi-year season setting framework. It's been adopted in other Western states for a long period of time. This is something that's been debated at some point or another throughout the majority of my career. We now, we feel like now it's just time. So some of the considerations are that, you know, most of the annual adjustments that we make, whether it's to big game, small game, migratory game birds, whatever, are really, really minor. If the reality is, if you look at the and let's just focus on big game for a second. If you look at the hundreds and hundreds of hunt areas we have across all those species, the reality is we do not change the vast majority of those license types and season dates and those sorts of things. But we do make changes on an annual basis, and certainly there's a lot of public interest in how we do set seasons. You know, we're also, I think, learning from our counterparts in the fish division. I hate to give Alan Osterland more credit than I need to, but the reality is the fish division has gone to an every other year reg cycle since the mid 1960s. We've adopted 3-year season setting cycles for our trophy game species for black bears and mountain lions. And again, like I said earlier, other Western states are doing this: Idaho, Montana, Colorado, Utah, and there's reasons why. But in order to really do this and vet this process internally right, we decided we needed to commission 2 surveys. The first survey was just to gauge internal support, but then we realized we needed to provide some clarity to some answers that could basically inform how one of our field managers makes his or her decision on whether or not to support multi-year season setting. So for example, what kind of reports would still be required? If we're doing most of the same work, what's the point? Like that sort of thing. So we were able to provide that clarity to them. And then we commissioned a second survey just this past year, which I'm going to go through here in a minute. And then ultimately is what we did is we formed an internal committee that was made up of folks from our IT and licensing section, along with wardens and biologists and some regional wildlife coordinators and supervisors. Before I get into the survey, I kind of just want to give the commission a little bit of idea of what all we considered. And so, it's what basically helped shape that survey. So first of all, whether or not we should even pursue multi-year season setting. And if so, should we be going to a 3-year or a 2-year cycle? What are the benefits and the drawbacks of it? Because, you know, there's certainly some of each. And then which regulations would we still need to potentially open annually? Waterfowl may be one of those. I'll get into that in a little bit later. Versus which ones can we go multiple years in between? And then whether or not we should stagger regulation cycles within a year. And so if you see the word stagger come up, is what I mean by that is we talked about all the different options. So we could either stagger regulations within a year, meaning, so for just as an example, and there's myriad ways to skin this cat, if you will, but we could take sheep, moose, goat, and bison out earlier and say in November, have that all buttoned up for the March commission meeting, and then the other big game species along with game birds or whatever, for the April commission meeting. So that extends that season setting process window, but it also reduces the intensity, I guess, of the process for each individual regulation. We could also stagger those species across years. So some years, say, we do sheep, moose, goat, bison one year, and then we do deer, elk, and antelope the next year. We talked about all those different options. And then we also talked about how in the off-cycle years, whether it is a 2 or a 3-year cycle, how we would make adjustments where needed. We'll get into that a little bit later as well. And then one of the things that we really focused on is if we adopt a multi-year season setting framework, what does this enable our folks to do? How does this allow us to reprioritize resources, time, et cetera? And really one of the most important pieces that I really want to focus on today is what would public engagement look like? If we adopt a multi-year season setting framework, the absolute must, the pledge that we will make to not only the commission, but to the public is that in no way, shape, or form are we going to diminish our public engagement with our constituents. In fact, we think really the opposite is we think we can actually really enhance public engagement. So just real briefly to go through our internal survey, just to give the commission an idea of the internal support. We surveyed a cross section of the entire wildlife division, along with some folks in our license section, communications, and an office manager part of it. But we had 114 respondents, and the reality is we had really widespread, strong internal support. There was 89% support to adopt a multi-year season setting framework, with 11% opposed. So when we asked folks, which season setting schedule would you prefer? The majority, 58%, told us we should set seasons every 3 years, followed by every other year. And then we still had some folks that wanted to set seasons annually. We did have slightly more support for staggering species within it, across years, versus doing all species all at once and then nothing in the off-cycle years. So what's our recommendation? So based on all this, all the internal deliberations that we had, the discussions at the field level, the committee, ultimately at a supervisor meeting, and then with wildlife administration, and then finally the director's office, the recommendation that the department would like to put forth would be to go to a multi-year season setting framework and setting these seasons every 3 years. And I'll go through the timeline a little bit later, just to reiterate, but our preference would be to go through the season setting process as per normal for 2026, begin our messaging campaign to the public, just to let them know that this is on the horizon. Begin messaging that at spring meetings this year, then go through the season setting process normally again in 2027, with 2027 being the first year of multi-year season setting. We would then not open regulations in 2028 and 2029, and then would again in 2030. We chose to recommend not to, despite some slightly more support internally, to not not stagger species within a year. And really the reason for that is the public engagement piece, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later too. We feel like we can do this with basically all of the regulations that we normally take out in the April cycle. So that's our Chapter 2 general hunting regulation, all of the big game regulations, our turkey regulation, and our small and upland game bird regulation. The one exception to this may be waterfowl, and that's because we have we have a federal framework in place where the Fish and Wildlife Service ultimately gives us a packet of recommendations for a conservative, liberal, or moderate package, and that comes to us annually. However, I should say that currently the flyway councils are dealing with a recommendation from the service to also adopt a 3-year cycle. But that's not yet in place. So the waterfowl reg may change in the future. Okay, so what are the benefits of multi-year season setting? Why are we doing this? Well, they're really threefold. It's regulation consistency with needed flexibility. We can really improve the public engagement piece of this, and it will allow for the reprioritization of work for department staff. So we'll focus first on the regulation consistency. So it's fair to say, if I was ever going to be critical of my own agency, we have an extremely complex licensing system, especially for big game. It's through no fault of anyone in this room. It's a process that we've inherited over decades and decades. But let's just think, for example, elk area 120 is antelope area 73 is deer area 34. That in and alone can be confusing to folks. We have myriad license types. Sometimes these types change from year to year, all for good reason. We don't make these decisions lightly. But it does lead to complexity. And for example, we have numerous license types changing in this current cycle right now from a type 6 to a 7 for consistency purposes. But when we do that, it is confusing sometimes for folks. We've also had some members of the outfitting community ask for this because it gives them certainty when they're having their clients apply for licenses. So that regulatory certainty when planning a hunt, I think is a real benefit to the public. Probably one of the biggest, besides reprioritization of time, biggest benefits that came out internally with the department staff was that a multi-year framework will allow us to better evaluate a prescribed season over time. When we can let a season run for 3 years at a time, it just gives you a much better indication of the true effect. So as an example, let's think of like an elk season. Sometimes our managers get forced into, sometimes it's on their own volition, sometimes it's due to public pressure, but we can make knee-jerk reactions to a season that just recently comes into place. When we adopted a raghorn elk season in eastern Wyoming several years ago, the first year we had it only had some moderate success, and we had to make some changes and things like that. But weather plays a role, especially with elk season. So you could have a significant change, and in a really dry year, elk harvest wasn't very successful, and conversely, you could have much better success than you actually anticipated. But you don't want to necessarily make those knee-jerk changes just based on 1 year of information. This is kind of a minor thing, but it will improve it'll streamline our regulation brochure development. So every year during the cycle, once final regulations are approved, we publish that, what the average member of the public just calls the regs, but it's the regulation brochure. There's a lot of work that goes into ensuring that those brochures match exactly what those regulations are. Again, not a huge thing, but it will streamline that process. The needed flexibility part of this is that, well, really one of the biggest questions that can come up from the public is, okay, if you guys are going to set seasons every 3 years, how are you going to make adjustments when needed? And rest assured, we can do that. We actually have 2 mechanisms in place to do that. We can utilize an emergency regulation, and the nuance, well, the semantics here are actually fairly important. An emergency regulation is truly an emergency in terms of the bar is really high for when we enable emergency regulation. So they're set for 120 days at a time. And then the process allows us to renew that regulation for one more 120-day period. So that's something, but it still requires you bypass the entire APA process, but it still requires the governor's office to sign off on those. We reserve those for very special circumstances. But we can also open a regulation in an off-cycle year if need be. And what we can do there is we can narrowly define that statement of reason that I talked about earlier to really pigeonhole ourselves in terms of we're going to open up, and let's just use an example of the severe 22-23 winter where we had unprecedented losses. We could open up, say, our deer and antelope regulations, and we're going to say, all right, we're only going to affect Region G or those deer hunt areas in Region G or these antelope hunt areas. And so we're not then beholden to having a regulation process open in Commissioner Haskell's district or something like that. So we will have that ability to make these biological adjustments whenever necessary. I mean, we've had to do it as recently as just a few years ago with a severe epizootic hemorrhagic disease outbreak up in the Black Hills where we lost thousands of deer, and it was a late summer thing. So rest assured those tools remain in the toolbox and can and would be used where necessary. We're certainly within a multi-year framework not worried about the need to increase harvest anywhere from beyond what was already established at the last formal reg cycle. And that is because we, thankfully have these. We've long had the tool of a Chapter 56 permit in place where we can issue a permit to either a landowner or with 2 department personnel to remove animals that are causing conflict, agricultural damage, those sorts of things. But we also just starting a few years ago, developed that Chapter 34 regulation. So we have tools in the toolbox to address damage that may not have been addressed at the last formal reg cycle. The improved public engagement piece. So this is one of the things that I really want to stress. So right now, with our current process, as biologists, it starts with the biologists and the game wardens, and then as these season recommendations become formulated and they go up through the chain and ultimately become the department's official recommendation, which then gets presented to the commission. Well, as they're formulating all these, sometimes things inherently come up. And one could ask, well, why aren't you planning for these things ahead of time? But it's just sometimes the way the process works. You're dealing with all these data. Maybe you did a new siteability survey for a mule deer herd and you realize you need to make adjustments or whatever it may be. Well, sometimes you get ideas from the public that, hey, we need to do this. And then we agree with those ideas. Yeah, we should do that. So, but it may be something significant. And so again, using that example of converting an area from general to limited quota or something like that. Well, when we hear those ideas from the public on a formal basis and those formal comments ultimately come to the commission, we can be too late in the process for that year. And so is what we really think can really, I guess, improve this public engagement piece is that this would enable us to get members of the public together every year. Once we've compiled this data, we've put it into our models, we have population estimates, we've completed our survey work, whatever it may be. And then we can show that data to the public, and then we can just take input from them on what they would like to see going forward. But we would not have our biologists up there with a formal proposal in hand. When we have formal proposals in hand, is what that can do is it can lead to really 2 things. Sometimes there's a natural human tendency for our folks to want to just defend the proposal when there's disagreement in the room, rather than really truly, and this isn't in no way, shape, or form meant to be critical of our folks whatsoever, but it's just a natural human tendency. And then we're not necessarily getting all of that input of what folks would like to see. Or able to accommodate it, I should say. But it also leads to members of the public sometimes thinking, well, the department's mind's already made up. So what's the point of attending these meetings? And so I guess I'd like to hearken back to we've long recognized this can be an issue. And starting years and years ago, it really started with our Lander region with Daryl Lutz and Jason Hunter came up with an idea of having these December postseason meetings. And so the goal there was to, right after the hunting season, while hunting seasons are still fresh on the public's brain, get folks together in a room. We're not presenting any kind of proposal, and we're just simply taking input on what the public would like to see. Those meetings were really, really successful. I know we adopted them for a couple years in Casper that I was personally a part of. We were able to take a bunch of input up front, and we actually made changes that year based on public input before we ever came back to them with our formal recommendations. And we felt like there was really a lot of buy-in from the public to do that. So one could ask, well, why don't you just do that and still set seasons annually? Well, the reality is we kind of feel like we meet people to death. We're meeting folks to death. I mean, anyone from the AG's office will tell us we far exceed the minimum requirements for the APA in terms of public outreach and meetings. We have meetings for every single regulation that comes open all the time. And just during season setting, if we were to host and annually integrate, like I say, a December postseason meeting plus a formal March meeting, folks may not know which one to come to. They may be confused at which one's more meaningful. And after a while, it just probably contributes to waning attendance. When I think back to my earlier career, when I first started as the Douglas biologist, it was common to get 30, 40 people in the room in little old Douglas. By fast forward 10 years later, and it's 5 or 6 people per year. Part of that's probably just a sign of the times and the way the public chooses to get their information or to make their comments. We live in the virtual world these days. But part of it could also be the way we've ran meetings in the past. Think about the mule deer community conversations that I think most of the commission was able to attend one. While, the attendance wasn't, we had 500 or so people, which is fairly similar to our March meetings. For those that did attend, felt like it was much more worth their while because they were giving us input. We weren't up there just defending a proposal. This also would allow us more time for landowner meetings. One of the things that really is compressed in our season setting cycle is we get elk harvest data in mid-February, and we have to get it in mid-February because a lot of our seasons will run to the end of January. Well, when we host landowner meetings, especially in eastern Wyoming, but really across the state, we don't want to host those meetings until we have all the data in hand. Because landowners naturally want to know how we did the previous season. So it just frees up a lot of things. And I also feel like if we were to go down this road, when we do get folks together on a more informal basis in these off-cycle years, we can present some of the other cool stuff that's going on in those biologist districts, whether it's habitat work, research, whatever. So reprioritization for department staff. I would really like to stress to the commission and to the public that adopting a multi-year season setting framework is not about avoiding work. We're not trying to get out of anything. We feel like this is a process improvement. This is really about reprioritization of our staff's time and resources. What can we do? There's an awful lot of things we can do. But first of all, I guess I'd like to say that the members of the public often see season setting because it's it's one of the most significant things we do. We advertise it, all these public meetings across the state, just the 5-month time frame that it incurs. A lot of folks then take that and translate it into thinking that it's the most important thing this agency actually does for wildlife. And I don't want to minimize the importance of season setting. We're a public resource manager. We're managing a public resource with public input. It's a very important thing that we do. But let's just think for a second about mule deer. We can go through all kinds of public angst and input and controversy to knock 50 non-resident deer licenses off in Region G or reduce a general season by 2 days. And we're only harvesting antlered mule deer in these places. Think about that versus work on what we could do with improving our seasonal ranges, where we identify crucial winter range and summer range and things like that, or the work that's done on highway crossings, which is actually physically saving mule deer. We have a backlog of a lot of things. We have right now, we're blessed with all the research that has gone on in the state, both internally and with external collaborators. But we have a huge set of collar data and herds across the state. But analyzing those collar data is extremely labor intensive and requires some special skill sets. And so enabling our field personnel to be able to have more time to analyze those data, we really think could move the needle for wildlife conservation a whole lot more than going through a season setting process every year. We have a lot of backlog of migration analysis. That doesn't mean we're necessarily going to be designating a bunch more migration corridors overnight, but it's still incumbent upon us that we need to better understand big game migrations across the state. It'll allow us more time to focus on things like our herd unit objective reviews. And then lastly, I think one of the bigger pieces too is this will give us more time to address some big picture management challenges. And one of the things that we're not always the best at, but we certainly try, is human dimensions. So, just last year, we presented to the commission our mule deer hunter attitude survey, and just how important and integral those survey data were into basically corroborating our management, but also informing mule deer management going into the future. Those things are really intensive. And when you mix that in with all the other public input process, we have to be measured in terms of how much we're going to interact with the public. So, but we have some needs, whether it's surveying on high-tech weapons or Type 9 archery only licenses. The black bear stuff we heard about yesterday, we have some needs to conduct more human dimensions work. So those are the benefits. So what are the potential drawbacks? What kind of sticky situation can we get ourselves in? Well, there is reduced flexibility for annual adjustments if we go to a multi-year framework. No matter what kind of seasons we set, it's just the nature of the business is that some folks will disagree with our recommendations. So once the commission approves a season, it's going to be set for 3 years. And so that can cause some concern, not only for the public, but also our managers. If you go down to the bottom bullet, scratch that. The other concern that can arise is just reduced internal familiarity with our season setting process. So if we're only setting seasons every 3 years, I think last we checked 50% of our game wardens had been hired in the last 5 years. We've got several new biologists on staff, just with retirements and agency turnover, things like that. If we're only setting seasons every 3 years, there will be some challenges, especially for newer personnel, to really understand how that process works. Nothing that we can't overcome, but it's something that we recognize. And then the public perception of just less formal involvement. When can I give input to the department? And when can I give input to the commission? Another potential drawback with 3-year season setting is the commission. And I guess depending on perspective of the commission, this could be a benefit, this could be a drawback, but there would be less formal engagement from the commission in terms of actually setting regulations. Because, if you think about a 6-year commission term, pretty much it would be just 2 times per commission term. But we feel like that while that may change, which may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing, there's still that enhanced public engagement piece that I think is also a really good opportunity for commissioners. I know Commissioner Masterson never misses a chance to criticize Brian Olson for not telling him about a public meeting or something like that. So, and I know that the commission has been incredibly engaged in attending public meetings across the state, and feel like this would even be an enhanced opportunity for you guys to hear front end input from the public. One potential concern is internally is that season proposals may naturally err on the side of being conservative. If we're setting seasons for 3 years at a time, let's think about ewe lamb licenses for bighorn sheep or doe fawn licenses for antelope or whatever it may be. If our managers know that these seasons are going to be set for 3 years, they may be more reticent to push that envelope in terms of maximizing public opportunity. So it's certainly another thing that we recognize. And the last thing is that if in the event we have an unfavorable season, that's going to remain in place for 3 years. And that can cut both ways. It can be a season that's unfavorable to members of the public. It could also be if the commission overturns a department recommendation. I know the commission does not make those decisions lightly at all, but the reality is it's a public process and you guys, the commission is weighing public input with all that. Well, then some of our managers could be stuck with a season that they didn't necessarily want, but that's okay. That's part of the process. So almost done here. So the additional consideration piece, there's a few things that if going to a multi-year framework that we still need to consider is again, we can open when on a biological need basis, we can open these regulations in an off-cycle year using that emergency reg process or just that narrowly defined reg opening to address the issue. But we want to set a really high bar for that. We're not going to be successful adopting a multi-year framework if we have folks, whether it's internally or externally, coming to us saying, okay, boy, we need to reduce licenses here, there, and everywhere for whatever reasons. And then we're back stuck into this annual process of opening these regs anyway. So we need to stick to our guns if we're going to do this. And the bar for opening those regulations needs to be fairly high. There's some just little minor nuances that we need to address still, like how we would set seasons that open on certain days of the week, like a sage grouse season that opens the third Saturday of September, youth season dates, things like that. So how we write that into regulation for 3 years at a time, those are things that we can certainly overcome. There's other things like external coordination that needs to occur, say up with Grand Teton National Park on their elk reduction program, or how we coordinate with the service on the National Elk Refuge. Nothing that's insurmountable. So just to kind of wrap this up, again, our recommendation for a timeline is, first of all, to ask the commission for support, which is what we're here to do today. We would then again set seasons normally in this spring and begin our public outreach campaign. We would look for any unresolved issues we have in the interim, set seasons again in 2027, and we would be evaluating this all the way. So again, the take-home message, I guess I'd like to leave the commission with would be that other Western states have done this. They've done it for a reason. They found success, and it's really, really been popular with internally, especially with their managers, and has not been an issue. So I'm told in the outreach that I've personally done has not been an issue with their publics. It allows our staff to considerably allocate time and resources, get some really big ticket items done that sometimes can just be challenging to do with all the other workloads they deal with. And if we're going to go down this road, we need to commit to it. We all realize there's going to be the pressures that come up. Like I talked about earlier, some folks are inherently not going to be happy with the recommendation, but feel like to make this successful, we need to stick to the guns to the best of our ability while recognizing the need to address, issues that arise, like a severe winter or disease outbreak or things like that. And lastly, just to reiterate, we're not fixing a problem. Our current process is not broken. No one's saying that it is. We just feel like this is a way to improve it. And with that, we'd ask for the commission's support, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Justin. I do have a question. I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is probably will be also beneficial to our outfitters as they're trying to set up their businesses with clients and things like that, if it was a little more consistent over a bigger chunk of time. I hear a lot from them about when seasons change and things like that, they're canceling clients and having to reschedule and things like that. Have you heard anything from them yet about support for this?
Yeah, Commissioner Lundvall, absolutely. I haven't had personally a lot of outfitters reach out, but I have had some. But we know that this is something, in fact, the president of Wyoga has reached out to me saying, finally, you guys are finally doing this. So that certainty for them, of just putting in applications for their clients, predictability with preference points, things like that. I think there is support.
Okay, thank you. Who else has questions, comments for Jeff? Commissioner Robertson.
Thank you, Madam
Go
President.
ahead, Commissioner Roberts. Thank you.
If, this, one thing I know with, talking to other commissioners from other states is they seem to all have their season setting done earlier than we do. Will this help us set it quicker in having the 3-year? Cause you know, I know I spoke with the commissioner from Idaho and he said, well, we've done ours last month, and the Utah was, oh, well, we've done our last month or whatever, and we hadn't even done ours yet. So will this help? Is that one of the reasons they could do it quicker to get it done? Or is that just built more into the different systems?
President Lundvall, Commissioner Roberts, we've thought about that quite a little bit. For example, Montana starts, you know, they're setting their seasons in December. The conclusion that we've come to internally is the short answer is no. And that is in terms of the years, and if we adopt this 3-year framework, on the 3rd year in which we actually set seasons, or 1st year, however you want to think about it, we would still want to stick to the same timeline that we have. And that's because of the nature of when all our harvest survey data comes in. Would like to get through the bulk of the winter that year, and then make those adjustments accordingly. I don't think there would be much appetite internally to change that timeline. But as what it would enable us to do is, whether it's that human dimensions piece I talked about or the public engagement piece, it would allow us to do that better in the off years and go into that year we actually set seasons with a lot more public input in hand and forethought into especially significant changes that need to be made. So it would relax that timeline, if that makes any sense.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the thought that's gone into this. And to follow up on Commissioner Roberts' question, if we went to a 3-year, wouldn't you be able to set seasons earlier in the year, because you would have that accumulated data? You wouldn't be scrambling like you are right now, you know, to get the data put together to set a season in the spring. You would have 3 years of data. So I'm not looking for a commitment. It's just conceivably you could move it up because you'd have 3 years of data already accumulated. Does that make sense?
So
I mean,
President Lundvall, Commissioner Masterson, I think it's fair to say, and maybe I should have mentioned this with Commissioner Roberts' question. I think it's fair to say that in the year in which seasons would be formally set, they would go into that much earlier with ideas of where they want to go, especially with bigger ticket changes, things like that. They would be much better prepared going into that cycle. However, the timing piece of it, we would still want to wait and still have meetings in March and then go through to the commission in April. Just for that year, we might as well use the most current winter in hand. And just in Wyoming, the nature of the beast is we can have periodic severe winters. And so we would still want to incorporate that during the year in which we set seasons.
I get it. Dr. Thompson yesterday used a phrase about bear statistics, that they smooth out. You know, when you take a 3-year look at things, the statistics smooth out. And that's what I kept thinking about when you were talking about getting 3 years of data. You might not have that erratic up and down. I'll tell you what, one thing that's really important to me to make clear is that this is not making anybody's life easier in the department. This doesn't mean that at, 4:59 PM, everybody takes off out of the parking lot. What this does though, is it lets you bring and do work on things that you are not able to do now because of the season setting process takes so much time. I just don't want the message to be out there that, oh, we're just gonna cut their workload. So, now, they can all go home early, because I don't see it that way. I see it as you have more than enough to fill your day. What this does is enable you to reallocate your resources, and do a better job of what you already do really well. Not you personally, but the department does really, really well. What really concerns me is, I'm gonna kind of selfishly, the season setting process is, to me, the best opportunity for face-to-face communication with the public and interacting with them and hearing their concerns. And you don't just hear concerns about the seasons, you hear about other concerns. And it's a very active, engaged process. And I thrive on that. And what concerns me is, and you mentioned it, is that even though we will still have meetings, and those are important, and hopefully Brian Olson will start inviting me before my term is done. But that kind of outreach really needs to continue, if not be upped. Instead of publicizing, maybe we need to invite. We have email addresses for landowners. Maybe we need to invite. Maybe we need to offer beer and potato chips, to get people to come to meetings. But that's the only hesitation I have, is missing out on that public interaction piece that I get so much out of. And I'm not asking you to comment one way or the other. I'm just expressing this to my fellow commissioners, that that's my only hesitation in this, is I will miss that. And I don't know. I'm hopeful that what you have suggested will take the place of that. I just don't know if it will. We'll see. But I'm all for it.
Thanks, Justin. And we spoke, last week or the week before, on harvest data on particular, is this going to speed up the harvest data that gets out to folks if we allowing, a little bit more time, more flexibility?
President Lundenball, Commissioner Roberts, for the most part, no, that there likely would not be a need. It could certainly relax some harvest survey timelines a little bit. The one, I guess one piece, if I'm channeling my inner Ember Hall here, that's hard to say, would be that with respect to harvest survey data, the further away you get from when those hunters were actually out hunting, probably the less quality data we receive. And when we're asking questions like how many days they hunt and when did they harvest their animal and that sort of thing. And so we would want to be really careful about it, but as what it would do would be relax the timeline from when we get those data to actually then present those to the public. Say if it's an off-cycle year, like in an informal meeting.
Madam President, thanks, Justin. Appreciate this information. I think the two major things that I don't know that they concern me, but that I think about is also the public, that in public involvement, and if we can get folks used to or start and engage in some regular yearly post season, how did the hunting season go when hunting season's still fresh in their mind. I think that would help, maybe December-ish or something like that. I think that would be good. But making sure that the public understands that we do have the flexibility for major concerns that happen on a yearly basis. And I think that's something that I understand it. I think we understand it. We've been through some of those things. But making sure that the public understands that we still can go in, open something up, fix an issue that is a major problem. And I think that's the thing that we have to get through to people, and then continue to, like I said, just continue to have that public involvement however we can.
And President Linval, Commissioner Bell, if I may add, that I think it would be really incumbent upon us to, in these off-cycle years when we're having these more informal informational meetings with the public, it would be really incumbent upon us to make sure that we, in some kind of standardized, systematic fashion, like capture that public input and codify it, if you will. And, it could be something we could present to the commission. We could have it, posted on the web, whatever it may be, so that there's actual record of, hey, this is what you told us, this is what we heard, that sort of thing. So it doesn't just disappear into the ether and then resurface 2 years later.
Thanks, Madam President. Justin, I appreciate the amount of work and thought that the department's put into this. And from a science standpoint, to me, it makes a lot of sense. It's when you mix that politics part of it that I think our fellow commissioners here are discussing, with the public input and all of that, that I think it gets a little more complicated. And the one question I've got for you is related to what we've dealt with a lot, and I know past commissions have dealt with, and I know the task force dealt with a lot, and that's the landowner license issue. And with where we're at right now, or potentially where we're at right now with folks considering this at levels above us, it just seems like there's little coincidence that the time that you spend, the proportionate amount of time that you spend on those hot button areas, area 7 elk, 124 elk, whatever, you guys, know them better than I do for sure. And I just wonder if, and I realize you won't have a proposal for the 3 year until next year. Would that be impacted by any decisions taken above our heads in the next 2 years? So if something changed in that realm, in that landowner license realm, would we next year have time to kind of pull back and evaluate on the timing of the length that we're approving? So next year, would there be an opportunity to say, we might be a little bit early, let's either take it to 2 years or keep it at 1 for right now or whatever?
Yeah, President Lundvall, Commissioner Mai. So if I'm understanding correctly, are you talking about other hypotheticals, or in this case, just specifically the transferable landowner license issue? Whether it's both, I guess I would say that a change that would be that major, I think we would have no choice. We would have to open regulations back up to accommodate whatever statutory change comes our way, or direction from governors, whatever it may be. I think we would have to do that, and it would be warranted.
Madam President, that's part of it for sure. But the other part of it is, with all the attention I think that we've drawn to, not just us, but that has been drawn to the landowner license issue, I'm not sure we all know how many landowner license applications there are going to be at this point. I mean, have we opened up a box where there's going to be a lot more than we've seen in the past?
Yeah, President Lundvall, Commissioner Mai, as of now, nothing is formally changing. But it is, in all likelihood, if transferable licenses like went through the legislature and passed, that there would be either renewed interest and certainly increased interest from landowners for applying for those licenses that may never have in the past. So the effects of how the ripple effects on public opportunity in those areas would be something we would absolutely need to consider.
Madam President, and Justin, and to Commissioner Mai's comments, which are certainly valid, it would be more of a distribution issue and not, not what that overall quota would be. And so, how that would be distributed in there based on what any kind of legislative action that would be taken. So, I think we would have to have the flexibility to do that. I mean, I think it's similar to if there's a way that we, if in fact the legislature ever deals with the big 5 preference point issue that non-residents have right now, that, they're getting a raw deal right now because it wasn't taken care of at the same time we went to 90-10. I mean, if something comes up like that at a legislative level, I think we would have to have the ability to go back in and say, we have to tweak this. So,
President Lundvall, Commissioner Bell, I think, and this goes back to Commissioner Mai's question as well. I think the devil will be in the details in terms of what comes through and changes in statute. So, for example, if it just becomes a 40% cap on landowner licenses, which has been debated in the interim, that's not going to affect our management, so to speak. And so I don't see a need to go open up regulations just to address that. That would be just our Chapter 44 regulations. So I guess it just depends on what kind of statutory changes come our way.
Madam President, kind of as a follow-up to that, I was looking in my handy regulation book. I don't see that there's a regulation that says we will set seasons every year or we will set them at a particular time. This is just the way we have always done business, correct?
Commissioner Lundvall, or President Lundvall, Commissioner Masterson, yeah, that is
Okay.
correct. So in my conversations with the AG's office, there's
Sure.
nothing either in regulation statute or in the APA that requires us to open these regulations every year.
Sure. And I think what you're hearing is what you touched on there. There's always the safety valve, right? I mean, there's always the ability to emergency regulation or open something up for public comment if the circumstances change from those above us. We can certainly come back in and do the necessary work we need to do. I mean, even under a 3-year plan, right?
President Lundvall, Commissioner Masterson. Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Madam President, thank you. Deputy Chief Benfit, thank you for this presentation. I know that last week when Chief Smith and you and I had a conversation about this too, initially my reaction was to say no, but I couldn't figure out why until I heard this, and it makes really good sense to me for all of the reasons that you have stated and my fellow commissioners have stated. I think consistency is really key, and that's what a lot of people ask for, is just for consistency. I know as an outfitter speaking to clients, both resident and non-resident, speaking to booking agencies and application consultants, the consistency piece is really crucial, and they really like that. So they can make their plans from year to year and kind of know what things are going to look like. I know when I speak to prospective clients, they ask me, what's it going to look like? What are draw odds going to be? It's like, well, I don't know. We're going to have to see what season setting looks like as far as, license numbers and things like that, to have an idea what odds are going to be. So I really like it in that aspect. I certainly support it. I'm interested to see what public comment says and, go from there. But thank you for this presentation, and thanks for all of the arduous work of putting this together, because it makes good sense at this point to me.
Yeah, President Lundvall, Commissioner Haskell, if I may, I kind of skipped over it fairly quickly on that timeline, but one of the pieces of that timeline was that reevaluation of this. And so certainly our recommendation to the commission and to the public is to adopt a 3-year season setting framework. But as we go through this, we're going to evaluate it and we're going to adapt accordingly. And if we decide we need to go to an every other year, whatever it may be, we'll certainly be looking at that and we'll make those changes accordingly if need be.
One quick follow-up, if I might, Madam President. So you're instituting, you're saying it's going to go 2027 season. That's when it's to be implemented. Did I get that right?
President Linval, Commissioner Roberts, yes, that's correct.
So we're on the clock with that, is what I want to say. Thank you. I wanted to make sure I had it because that's going to be one of the first questions people ask. Exactly when are you going to go? And I wanted to make sure I heard it correctly.
If I may, I was going to ask for an outfitter point of view, and he made it pretty clear. There's going to be some problems here and there, and I'm pretty sure our department's good enough to take care of little bits and pieces that happen that go wrong. I think it's 100% good.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? So if I read this correctly, you're not asking for us to vote on this today. You're just asking for the support to move forward with the process. And then we will come back around to finalize it once we start doing some of these other things. Is that what I'm reading correctly, Justin?
Well, President Lundvall, there's a little bit of ambiguity here in terms of, we're certainly asking for the commission's support on this. It's not a formal motion, so we're not asking for formal approval or adoption. I do think it's fair to say, though, if the commission doesn't support us going down this road, we're not going to go down this road. So we're asking for support, but it's not necessarily a formal motion.
Right. Okay.
How you gonna do this?
Well, I mean, we've done this on multiple times before where we can informally tell you to either go after something or bring us more information and things like that, where it doesn't take a formal vote.
Yeah, and Madam President, if I could chime in, David can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you vote to approve the seasons in April of 2027, the ask then would be for a 3-year season. So that'll be the official vote, but what the department is asking for now is support to start to do all the prep work and to go forward with that in mind.
So with that in mind, are there any other questions or comments? Do we have an overall sense of support to start the process?
Yes.
All right, that's what we're getting from the commission. So carry on and we'll look forward to hearing more from you later.
President Lundvall, Director Bruce, members of the commission, thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Mr. Miller.
Morning, President Lundvall, members of the commission, Director Bruce. I am here this morning to give you an overview of the donated license program and the disability permit program that we have in place. And I'm Dirk Miller, the Fiscal Division Chief, for those in Zoom land. So this morning, I want to talk a little bit about the statutes and regulations that surround these two programs, give you some history, show you some numbers, data about how this program has gone, talk about the number of licenses, the number of people that have received them, the organizations that are involved, and those related disabled permits. And this is a big game and trophy game program. The first licenses were donated in 2011. In 2015, the statute was modified and the first wheelchair-bound hunter language was introduced. Over time, the number of volunteer organizations have grown. As I worked on this presentation, I gained an appreciation that our records are not perfect. So for example, they've had to have organizations involved with the program from the beginning. our data about the organizations starts in 2017. So anyway, some of the, I'm going to show you quite a few graphs, and the time span on the different graphs vary because of the data we have or when some of those regulations came into being. So the history of the disabled hunter permit program started in 2013. This slide seems really out of place to me. Did something happen to my, it says it's slide 4. Okay, well, I'll keep talking because maybe I'm just out of whack. Anyway, so in the disabled hunter permit program started in 2013, and then it allowed people to, disabled hunters to shoot from a vehicle, and the disabled hunter companion program started then. In 2017, the disabled hunting season extension started. And one thing in general with that program is we've seen an increasing request for those permits. The requests have been pretty steady. The number of people, because you can receive these permits one time and they continue to be good into the future, we have increasing number of people who are eligible. As far as the statute goes, there's just a little clip of the statute here that says these licenses, people can surrender their licenses and they can be reissued to veterans with disabilities. And that's all it says is veterans with disabilities. So the regulation has definitions about what that means, and or persons with a permanent disability who uses a wheelchair. And then the other thing I wanted to point out to you is that these recipients of the licenses are selected and sponsored by a nonprofit charitable organization. So the department doesn't choose who receives them. We manage the program based on donations and what we receive from the organizations. And then just in regulation in Chapter 44, to be eligible for a disabled veteran license, you have to currently receive at least 50% or more service-connected disability compensation. I wasn't involved in those regulations at the time. I'm not sure why in this one we say service-connected disability compensation. There's a couple other references I'll show you to service-connected disability, but anyway, that's the definition. And then the other one for the wheelchair bound is, I think, more clear cut. You have a permanent disability that requires you at all times to be confined to a wheelchair. So I have a section here about how many licenses are donated, who donates them, what kind of licenses are donated. So this is a graph. You'll see similar looking graphs, several of them. Starting in 2011, you can see that the number of licenses donated increased over time. And about 2018, it's been a little more stable. As you might expect, in the COVID year, the numbers were down a little. In a bunch of these graphs I have up in the upper left, what the average per year over the last 5 years, sort of kind of post-COVID, what are we averaging? So here we're averaging 489 licenses donated per year, over the last 5 years. There are always some of those licenses that are not reissued. Some of them are donated very late. Some of them are maybe difficult access, but for a variety of reasons, not all of the licenses actually end up being reissued. And so you can see over the last 5 years, about 91% of the licenses donated have been reissued. Who donates them? Mostly residents. So the vast majority of the licenses donated, 89% in the last 5 years, came from residents. Most of those licenses are regular licenses. There are a handful of landowner licenses. So 17% of the licenses donated do come from landowners. So So just some other numbers related to the donors. 2,500 people donated about 2 licenses apiece on average over that time. 65% of all the donations were one person who donated a license one time. So about a third of the licenses come from somebody who donated one time. And we do know that there'll be people who have plans, have a license, and then whatever it falls through, we'll maybe receive a phone call like, hey, how could I get a refund? And we talk them through the refund or reservation process, and they realize that because their boss made them go to a meeting doesn't qualify you for a refund. They say, well, geez, what can I do with it? And so they'll donate those licenses. So about a third of the licenses come from people who make one-time donation. And then there's, just under 200 people who donate 5 or more. And so 8% of our donors represent a third of the licenses donated. And there's a handful of people who are very passionate license donors. 8 of them have donated 28 or more, or 20 or more. We have one person who's donated 28 licenses to the program since it started. When you make a donation, you can designate, I would like this to go to a veteran, I would like it to go to a wheelchair-bound hunter, or you can give it to whoever. And this starts in 2015 because before then, it was only a veteran program. So starting in 2015, you can see the majority of the donations are designated to veterans. And I think that reflects the organizations themselves working pretty hard to get those donations. And 86% of those in the last 5 years went to veterans. So are those full price licenses, reduced price licenses? And so you can see of the deer, elk, and antelope licenses, they're about half full price, half reduced price. And then for moose, sheep, and goat, we mostly full price, but there are, we've had a few of the reduced price ewe lamb licenses for sheep that have donated. And then trophy game are all full price licenses because that's the kind of licenses we have. In terms of species over the history of the program, it's the antelope are leading the pack in terms of numbers of donations. You can see in the last 5 years, there's been an increase in elk. So now we're getting more elk licenses than antelope. And we get a few sheep and moose licenses every year. And again, those are people whose hunt didn't work out. I think there are also some people who have an awful lot of points and just couldn't physically go on a sheep hunt, perhaps. But I don't know. I'm just guessing that. So who's receiving these licenses? Of the licenses that were reissued, so this is a slightly different graph, of the ones that are reissued, the vast majority of them are going to non-residents. So you saw the majority of the donors were residents, the majority of the recipients are non-residents. And over the last 5 years, about 83% of the total have gone to non-residents. And then so breaking that out by license type, so you can see that deer, elk, and antelope, fewer of them go to residents. The once in a lifetime licenses, more in the 50-50 range of residents or non-residents who receive those. And the bear and lion licenses, residents can just buy those over the counter. So those have gone all to non-residents. So in terms of the licenses that are reissued, you can see the number of recipients in blue and the number of licenses reissued in orange. And so that indicates that there are some people getting more than one license in every year. And if you averaged it across the last 5 years, across all the people, it's at like 1.2 licenses per hunter. So again, some more numbers, about almost 4,200 licenses reissued. 2,300 people received a license over everyone. That average is about 1.8 license per hunter. We had 1,700, almost 1,800 of the people who received a license only in 1 year. And a few of those people got two licenses that year, but 3/4 of the license recipients were only here and hunted on a donated license 1 year. And then there were a few who were here 2 years, and those people had just over 2 licenses apiece. So a few of them had more than 1 license in a year when they were here. So there were a few people who have received quite a few licenses. So the people who hunted in 3 or more years averaged 6 licenses per hunter. They represent 11% of all the hunters, and about over a third of all the licenses went to a handful of people. And I should say that that's completely within the regulations. There's nothing, I think the commission would have the authority to change that, but there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just pointing out to you that that's what it is. And then just a few numbers that stuck out to me. There are 3 people who had at least 1 license in 9 different years. 6 people had 5 licenses in 1 year. A couple of them had 6 licenses in a single year. And 1 person has received 20 licenses over the history of the program. Most of the donations the assignment of donor and recipient is pretty random, but there are a handful of people who the same donor gave the license to the same person multiple years. And so there were a couple hundred times when 1 person gave a license to the same person. 160 of them did it twice. There were 25 of them where 1 person gave it to 1 recipient 4 or more times. And then I can't tell you if they're the same families, but I just could look and say, did their last names match? And so for the people who had the same last names, they were almost entirely residents who were going to someone with the same last name that's a non-resident. And there were about 60 of those folks. And the same donor to the same recipient with the same last name repeated 8 times. There were 1 person who's had a deer and an elk license for 6 years from the same recipients. Again, that's legal. It's not illegal, but it just stuck out to me when I looked at the data. And then, so what about the organizations? Since our record started in 2017, there have been 82 different organizations. 54 of them, we saw them in 1 or 2 years. 44, which might not be the same as the 54, but another 44 of them, only had 5 or fewer licenses over time. And we haven't seen 16 of those organizations since the pandemic. On the other hand, we have a few organizations that have been worked hard over the whole time. There are 4 of them that we've seen all 9 years that we have data. And Hunting with Heroes leads the pack by quite a lot. They've issued more than over half of all the licenses that we have. So if you look back to 2017, they're the sort of the top 10 organizations. Just point out there are a couple of new organizations that don't show up in all 9 years, but have become pretty active in the last few years. And here's just again to show you the 5-year data. Again, some new organizations, but there's just get a look at who's involved. And then just to show the type of licenses that are handled by those top 10 organizations, you can see that Hunting with Heroes has had a few wheelchair licenses issued. And I think someone could, if they qualified as a veteran, could get a veteran or a wheelchair license, but there were at least a few that they issued wheelchair licenses went to people for them. Assignment Wyoming disabled hunters is, kind of 2 to 1 wheelchair to veteran. And then you can see the chairbound hunters are solely a wheelchair focus. Points out again, most of the program is a veteran focused program. So I'm going to shift gears away from the donated program and talk about these disabled permits. There's a handful of types of these permits. So one is a disabled hunter permit. One is a disabled hunter companion permit. And there's another version of that that can be issued to an organization instead of an individual. A central visual acuity disability permit, and finally, disabled hunter season extension permit. These are valid as long as the person continues to meet eligibility, except for the disabled hunter companion must be renewed annually. It's our intention. We're going to revise, that's in chapter 35. We're going to bring a chapter 35 revision to you in your July meeting. And it's our intention to not require annual renewal of the disabled hunter companion. And then hunters can hold multiple of these. So you could have a disabled hunter permit and a season extension, or central visual acuity and a disabled hunter, except you can't be both a disabled hunter and a disabled hunter companion in regulation. So in terms of some of the details of those, the central visual acuity permit is the one we issue the least of. We've only issued 53 of those, but allows the holder of that permit to use a scope that projects a visible light onto the target, onto the animal. And these are not valid in Teton Park or on the Elk Refuge. The disabled hunter permit is one that allows you to shoot from a stationary vehicle. You can't shoot from a road, but you can shoot from a vehicle. And it allows you to be accompanied by a person with a disabled hunter companion permit. I'll talk about what that allows. And again, this one also is not valid in Grand Teton Park or on the refuge. And so to be eligible for a disabled hunter permit, unable to walk at all times without assistance from a mechanical device, restricted by lung disease or cardiac condition that's defined in regulation, permanent physical impairment that prevents you from holding a firearm or bow, again, the central visual acuity, and then military service connected disability of at least 70%. And again, this is an interesting, I wasn't here, I don't know how we picked those numbers. To be eligible for a veteran license, you have to be 50% disabled. For the disabled hunter permit, it's 70, and we'll see in a minute that the season extension is 100%. A disabled hunter companion is allowed to retrieve an animal that's killed by a disabled hunter, and it also allows that companion to take a wounded animal that has been wounded by the disabled hunter. So if they make shot, the animal gets out of range of the or sight of the disabled hunter, they can dispatch that one. But you have to have a disabled hunter companion permit. You can't just be accompanying them without the permit to have those provisions. And so here are the numbers of permits issued, and these they remain valid as long as you are eligible, you meet the eligibility requirements. So you can see in the first year, there was a significant interest in having a disabled hunter permit when they first became available in 2013. And then the demand has been relatively steady every year. And you can just see now we've got about, over 8,000 of those hunters who potentially could be using that permit. And we've issued 489 of them on average the last 5 years. So the hunting season extension permit allows someone to hunt antelope, deer, and elk 5 days prior to the earliest opening date in the hunt area for the limitations of the license that they have. And they're not eligible for an early start to an archery season, but for any of the other seasons, you can start before the official opening day of the season. To qualify for this hunting season extension, it's again a physical disability that you're physically confined to a wheelchair or similar device. Central visual acuity, again, And this one where it's 100% service-connected disability. And then this one also has there's statute and regulation around life-threatening illness for someone who is 20 years or younger. Again, sponsored by a qualified nonprofit, but that also qualifies. People who are eligible for those licenses can get the season extension. So just looking overall, of the 2,300 people who have received donated licenses, about 57% of them have some sort of a disability permit. About a little over half of them have the disabled hunter. Now, just over a third of them have the season extension. But of the 850 that we've issued season extensions overall that have been issued to people who also received a donated license, 600 of those have been issued in the last 5 years. So there has been increasing interest for that permit among the recipients of donated licenses. And then looking at season extensions for all hunters. So this is not restricted to just people who have a donated license. This is everyone who has a season extension. So there are about 2,800 of those issued now, and we're issuing about 350 of those a year. So if we go back here, there's 2,300 people who've received donated licenses. 1,300 of them have a disability permit. 800 of those season extensions are for people with a donated license. So there's 2,800 total. So there's a couple of thousand people who have a donated license or have a season extension who did not also receive a donated license. So there are plenty of people who qualify for a season extension that just buy their own license, if that makes sense. And so I want to close with a comment from a hunter and just say that this is a valuable program that has been really meant a lot to many of the people who have been able to participate, that receive these donated licenses, that have been able to participate in programs. These comments just came in from a hunter who hunted this year, that it made a big difference in his life. And so with that, I would be happy to attempt to answer any questions from all of you.
Madam President, if I got a quick question, if you might. I was kind of, has there been any thought, or am I missing anything? You have all of the permits being donated. What about Wyoming first responders that are injured? I mean, you have, law enforcement, EMS, search and rescue, of course, firemen and stuff. Why isn't that a part of the program? Because it seems to me that if all the licenses are being donated from Wyoming folks, why isn't that incorporated for our first responders that are hurt or have some sort of a thing for a disability?
President Lundvall, Commissioner Roberts, that's a statutory thing. So the statute, when it was initially set up, was specific to disabled veterans. I believe there were disabled veteran advocates who lobbied that. And then I think the addition of wheelchair-bound hunters was also done with a promotion by the folks who participate there. So I don't know if there's been discussion at the legislature, but it would take a change by the legislature to allow that.
Madam President. My question is, so on slide 9, the reasons for not, I guess I'm curious, when we don't reissue one of those licenses, what would be the reasons? Are they given too late, donated too late, or I'm just curious about that.
It's a whole mix, but yeah, mostly they're donated late, and some of them are just not, they're not great licenses. They're reduced price license, limited access, perhaps. I think there's a whole mishmash. I'm getting nods from the people in the back who know the answers.
I think that's kind of what I figured. And then my next question, I think slide 11, just has the landowner, says donated licenses from a landowner. Is that an actual landowner license?
Yes, yep, 100%.
Okay, perfect.
I have lots of comments and lots of questions, but I know we have some folks here that would like to speak, so I'd like to do that first. Bill Bruniger, would you like to come up, please?
Madam President, Director Bruce, Commissioners, good morning. I was actually hoping to hear what you had to say because it might influence what I say. First of all, I'd like to thank not just the commission over the years, but the department. This program is extremely valuable, not just to Hunting with Heroes, but many other organizations. As you know, you participated in those programs, and I think you were actually part of one of those programs at one point. And if I'm not mistaken, you helped draft the original language for this. So I'm going to skip over some of this because it's not relevant at this point, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a history on how some of this language came to be, which you're very familiar with, Madam President. But when this first came to be, just to give you a little history, I was a game warden for almost 20 years. And so I kind of have a unique perspective, both sides of the fence. And I'll be honest, when this first was proposed as a game warden, most of us didn't like it. The season extension. We thought, oh man, like just another avenue for someone to take advantage of the system. I got to be honest, I was wrong. I didn't see any of that. I never wrote a ticket to anyone that was abusing that. It was almost a non-event. My phone wasn't blowing up with members of the public that didn't like it, which is what we were concerned about, because you could have rifle hunters out there when guys are trying to archery hunt because they're hunting early. I just didn't see that. And back in 2014, Dan Cura, who was with Hunting with Heroes, met with Mike Choma. And, Mike Choma and our folks really are the ones that sat down and discussed, well, okay, how's this language going to affect veterans? So initially it was 70%, that if you had a 70% service connected disability, you could get the season extension. And there was a little bit of discussion about maybe making it where you had to be in a wheelchair. Well, one of our co-founders is an amputee. So how is that going to affect him? So they sat down with Choma, and what they came up with is, well, what about if it's 100% service connected disability? And so the department and the Hunting with Heroes decided that was a doable agreement. So that's where we've lived for, I don't know, 10 years. So our program has evolved with those stipulations. We have multiple hunts around the state that are strictly ran during the 5-day early season extension. So that 5-day early season extension is critical to how we do things. With landowner cooperation, we have outfitters that are okay with the landowner letting us come in with our veterans before they do, which, think about that. That's pretty rare. That's pretty awesome cooperation. If we didn't have that, I'm not going to ask the outfitter, well, you have paid clients, like, can you let us in first before your guys come? It just isn't going to work. So I just bring that up because I know there's been some discussion about the 100% service connected disability. There's been some scrutiny around that. This is something I really wanted to touch on. I'm still friends with a lot of game wardens around the state, so I hear some of these issues that are coming to light. Somebody sees a hunter in the backcountry, they're not in a wheelchair, and they're hunting early. People have grief over that. And I think we have to agree on what does 100% disabled veteran look like? Because I think society is guilty of assuming that if you're 100% disabled, you can't walk, you look a certain way. It's really hard for us to imagine what a veteran has gone through to get that 100% disabled rating. They don't pass them out like candy. Like there's a perception out there that the VA has gotten soft and it's easy to get these. It's not. And I'm gonna describe a couple different veterans that I personally know. And then I'm gonna ask you to guess. I won't really do that, but I'm gonna see if you think either one of these would apply if you remove that 100% stipulation and just kept the other language. So the first one, here's a list of what they gave me. Amputated left leg, fused back, fused right humerus, nail in right leg, pins in right ankle, severe traumatic brain injury, nerve damage on right leg from severed sciatic nerve, spleen removed, collapsed lung, broken ribs, hypertension, shrapnel in legs and lower back, was on dialysis for weeks, 30 plus blood transfusions, and in a coma for 22 days. And they are 100% total and permanent and combined disabled. That's their rating from the VA. So the second one, traumatic brain injury from explosion from tail rotor on helicopter, PTSD with alcohol abuse, sober for 2 years due to hunting, hip displacement, both shoulders compressed from getting blown off the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, night terrors, right knee tendonitis with painful movement, degenerative arthritis of thoracolumbar spine, benign proximal positional vertigo, gout and neuropathy due to contact with chemicals and burn pits, right elbow epicondylitis, I'm slaughtering that, tinnitus, GERD and irritable bowel due to chemical exposure in combat zone. And this is how honest these guys are. This guy even says he has ED due to all the medications that he's on. He's also 100% permanent and total disabled veteran. And the reason I bring these up is I know behind the scenes there's been some discussion of possibly removing the 100% service connected disability from the qualification for the season extension permit. Neither one of these guys would qualify if you remove that. So we're going to ask basically all they'd qualify for is a disabled veteran or a disabled hunter permit, which really all that does is allow you to shoot from a vehicle, which most of them don't want to do. The veterans are wired differently. Despite all the injuries and everything they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, they don't want to be confined. They will push the limits as long as their bodies allow them. So if a guy's in the backcountry 5 miles, we don't know what he's dealing with. Who are we to judge? We're going to get a few complaints. I understand that. I was a game warden. I dealt with all of that for 20 years. We're talking about a handful of hunters for one that are out there and a handful of complaints. And I do want to touch on the graph that brought some attention. There's 2,700 something season extension permits that have been issued, which do not expire, but that's a little misleading. And here, let me explain. So those permits can go to, let's say you're a non-resident hunter, you're disabled veteran or wheelchair bound, you meet any of those qualifications and you draw a tag, you get that permit, you're a one and done. Like you're not using that permit every year. We don't have 2,700 something season extension permit holders out on the landscape on an annual basis. So we don't really have any data, to my knowledge, that shows how many of those get used on an annual basis, but I think it's pretty small. Just keep that in mind when you hear complaints from the public. It's not very many people. And I mentioned we have hunts. Our Casper hunt relies 100% on that season extension permit to run our hunt. We run up to 14 hunters a year. If we did not have that, it just wouldn't exist. So it's vitally important. And for 11 years, Hunting with Heroes, we've been facilitating these hunts for disabled veterans who possess those permits. we've grown along, like I said before, we've grown alongside this program. So however the commission decides to make any changes in the future, we really want to be a part of discussions with language if it does come to that point. I do want to just read one quick quote I received from a Special Forces veteran that I know. And I'm sure we all know veterans, they don't have their hands out. They don't like to ask for much. So I really took this to heart because I was talking to him about maybe some of the potential changes to this program and how he felt about it. And this is how he views it. He says it's an official gesture to that segment of veterans directly acknowledging their sacrifice. It's about the loss of capability directly linked to service. Other than the ugly disabled veteran plates and property tax break, there's very little acknowledgement of that sacrifice. That simple lack of recognition as one of the leading causes of mental struggles leading to veteran suicide. And I won't read the rest of it because that's his main point, but there's a lot of things they're dealing with, and I appreciate this program. And I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Burke,
That one's on Zoom, I think. This one?
he's here.
Never mind.
Madam President, Director, Commission, all the important people behind computers. Hello, everybody. Hey, I run the Christian Adventure Network, and we're the new kids on the block here in Wyoming. Just started the chapter called the Wyoming Christian Adventure Network. And so I just want to take you back to 1986. In 1986, I was given my very first weapon, a gun, a Little Red Ryder, BB gun. I was taught how to hunt. And I was equipped with the idea of feeding my family because we lived in poverty. Well, those skill sets and that love and passion for the outdoors stuck with me throughout my entire life. I served 13 years in the military. And if you guys want to know what a 100% veteran looks like, 100% disabled vet looks like, that's me, right? In 2011, I was hurt in Afghanistan. And I went through a couple years of rehab, failed rehab. The VA let me down, the medical community let me down, and the church let me down. And so I was close to tapping out. I was right there. And the taste of metal don't fit well with being a Christian. And so I chose to fight forward. And in doing so, I started this organization in 2013. And I wanted to figure out the why. Why was I struggling? Why are so many other veterans and first responders struggling? When I started this, there was no programs for first responders. And I was very empathetic because I served in fire rescue before I joined the service. And so what I discovered was there is a gap between science and religion. And I wanted to bridge that gap because the scientific community brings so many powerful tools and resources, but they don't always talk to the religious community. And the religious community doesn't recognize the power of the scientific community. And so what I needed to do was bridge that gap because most veterans, based on my research, most veterans commit suicide because they fall in that gap, because the church can't help them because they're not equipped to handle combat trauma. And the scientific community just they don't want to talk about religion. And there's power in the name of Jesus. And so we bridge that gap and we focus on the the foundation of family, the foundation of faith, of establishing purpose, and in giving back the opportunity of them feeding themselves. Yeah, this goes back to childhood, right? And a lot of warriors, they find healing through sensory-based experiences. And these sensory-based experiences, I'm talking about like the Ratatouille moment, Y'all ever watch Ratatouille, the movie? Right? So there's a lot of evidence in that if you take a vet who grew up with his grandpa teaching him woodworking, that you put him back in a woodworking shop, it brings back these positive childhood memories, which combats those traumatic memories. Now, we're also separating the difference between dramatic stress and traumatic stress, because not all that are classified as having PTSD have PTSD. They have dramatic stress because they saw some crap happen, but they never experienced it, and it messed them up, and they're being treated incorrectly by psychologists and the medical community. So I have over 10 years of research that backs up our model. And I am so fortunate and blessed that you guys allow this. See, I participated in the Arizona donated program. And when I went there, man, it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome, but it was a Band-Aid. There was no ointment under that Band-Aid that would help my moral wounds and give me purpose. The program that took me out a couple of times in Arizona never taught me how to hunt. They never taught me how to apply for the licenses. And so what I was left with is being dependent on that organization to go hunt. And I didn't like that, because I wanted to be able to be independent and on my own to apply for it and to go out and learn how to do it my own and carry my weight and put skin in my game of healing. And so what we've done is we really took all the awesomeness that all these organizations do, and then we just recreated it and redeveloped it. And so what we do is we recruit the outdoorsmen in Wyoming to become mentors. And instead of focusing on religion, we focus on relationships. We help bridge that gap by giving them someone to communicate with, to have someone in their corner. This is being an outdoorsman, and to build a friendship. And all the veterans that go through our program through this donated license, they're given the direction and guidance on how to apply for license next year. And what we're hoping for is that they are able to become independent and be able to feed their family and have that sense of purpose again. Because that right there, you take a man's purpose or a woman's purpose, and you really take their will to live. So I just want to applaud Whit and Melissa, man. They took me on. Not a lot of skepticism. I'm a little weird. I'm a little crazy, but that's who I am. So I apologize for my informalities. I really focus on having fun, because we just kind of forget about that as adults. How to have fun, how to tap into our childhood roots, and then live again. Just be excited about life. So that's me. That's thank you so much. You guys have any questions for me?
Thank you, sir.
I would love the opportunity to meet you guys in person or personally. If you guys want, just hit up Whit or Melissa, and I can drive back up. I'm down in Loveland, so it's a short hop for me. All right, thank you guys.
Okay. I think this is an in-person, but if not, we can get on Zoom. Mr. Grillo? In person, yeah.
Council. I'm going to be super brief. Bill said everything perfectly. I am 100% disabled veteran as well. And I just wanted to let you know that the work that Melissa and Whit have been doing is phenomenal. I just wanted to take a minute to thank them and to thank y'all for letting us do what we do. I was number 10 on the list. I'm just happy I made the list. But it's a life-changing experience, and you guys definitely have the right people in place to make that happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone on Zoom? Okay. Anybody else in the public want to comment? All right. I got all kinds of questions and comments and fun stuff. So we're talking about two separate issues here, two separate things. We're talking about donated licenses, which is statute, which I don't think we can say enough. I don't think people understand. I don't know about the rest of the commissioners, but I get probably hundreds of emails of people that are wanting something changed, and they don't understand the power that we do have and the power that we don't have here as commissioners. And so I want to make it really clear. The donated license program is statute. And so there are no changes that we can make to that program that doesn't go through the legislature. Talk about that a little bit first.
Yeah, Madam President, the statute around the donated license program is relatively short. The clip I had on the screen included authorizing the commission to establish regulations. So we have quite a few regulations around what it means to implement that program. So yes, you have authority. You can't color outside the lines. We can't add first responders to it, but we, how those are issued. One of the things that I meant to say at the first, what started me down the path of wanting to give you this presentation this time was Mr. Brenniger in November said, I have a waiting list of 2,000 people. And I knew that we have some people who get a lot of licenses. I think you as a commission have authority. You could say people could only have one license every 5 years or whatever that number would be. So you have authority to do that. You don't have authority to add other categories, if that helps.
Because I agree with Commissioner. I think children with life-threatening illnesses, we've got kids that are passing away before they can get those donated, before they can get any license to get into the field. Injured first responders, like was mentioned, I think there's a lot of things there that can be added to it, but I know we need to take a different route for that. So let's go back to what we can do as a commission. How many of the once in a lifetime tags, it's my understanding that people getting a donated license can receive more than one of those. Is that correct? And do we have numbers on how often that is happening?
Madam President, there is no restriction on how many licenses of any kind that people receive. There are 2 people who have received 2 of those. One person received a type 1 moose license and a type 4, which is an antlerless moose license. Someone else received a type 1 sheep license and also received a reduced price ewe lamb license. So there are examples, they're rare, but there's no prohibition against people receiving more than those. And the language in the statute about those once in a lifetime licenses is the same language that you see around the super tag and the governor's licenses that just says, if you get one of these, you can still keep your preference points and you could still draw a moose or sheep if you have points and you're lucky. But you could receive multiple of these if the organization that received the license chose to assign it to someone.
Okay. And like it's been mentioned, I've been involved in this since before I even was a part of the commission. And I know we always have these wonderful intentions, right? We write these things, not realizing further down the road what could happen or that someone may find a loophole and things like that. But I am a huge supporter of the donated license program. I love that we have it. I know that it allows a lot of organizations to continue doing what they do. I do have a little bit of an issue with that very small group of people that are they're doing it legally right now, but in my mind would seem like an abuse. And I just wanted to hear from the rest of the commission on that. What are the thoughts of those once in a lifetime tags being truly once in a lifetime tags, as opposed to someone being able to be donated multiple of those for their lifetime? Just wondered thoughts from the commission.
If I may, I think once in a lifetime, I'm stuck with once in a lifetime, and everybody here is stuck with once in a lifetime. I think even for this situation, I think my personal opinion is should be once in a lifetime. Even though a person is disabled, I don't think they should get more than everybody else should get.
Madam President, I think actually, if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner Jolovich is not limited to once in a lifetime if he gets a super tag.
Right.
So you are but however, I'm just going to preface that with we have to have somebody receive that tag over and over and over again. I think I don't know that it's right. I mean, I think especially when there's a lot of different style or types, species of donated tags, to issue somebody a sheep tag or a moose tag or a goat tag more than once. I mean, I just, and I'm not unsympathetic to disabled hunters or veterans. I think this program is absolutely wonderful. But it's something like that can put the program in jeopardy. And so I would hate to have that happen, because we have somebody potentially abuse that and do something like that. And sometimes it only takes once or twice, and then somebody in a legislature says, you know what, that's just not right. Let's do away with the program. And not that I'm saying that that's going to happen, but I think that we as organizations can manage that ourselves and not have to worry about that. I would hope we wouldn't have to do that through regulation or something, but anyway, that's where I'm at on it.
Madam President, if I will say that some of the people who have received many licenses work with many organizations. So if Hunting with Heroes says, hey, you've had a bunch of these licenses, they may well go to another group that doesn't know Hunting with Heroes gave them. So we have seen some folks who are effective at and not with once in lifetimes, but with the other aspect.
Yeah. Oh, I know. When we started Wyoming Disabled Hunters, we would ask people specifically, what other hunts have you gone on? And then they would sometimes, this was rare, people would just lie and say, oh, none. And then we'd get on social media and they had been on 6 or 7 different hunts that year with different organizations. And I know with Wyoming Disabled Hunters, as well as hunting, we have lists of hundreds of and thousands of people that would love to get out and have one hunt. And we've got some people that it's like their job is to go around and do all these hunts and things like that. So that's my biggest concern is I love this program. I love what it does, but I want it to be able to not only continue, but to serve as many people as possible. So I would be interested in hearing from the department, maybe in March or further on, because I know the language has to be done just right and things like that. But what can we do to make sure that these are not being abused? And yes, I know it's a very small group of people, but just to make sure that it's getting spread out to all the hundreds and thousands of people that it could help, as opposed to one person or just a small group of people getting the same licenses over and over.
If I could address that, Madam Chair, the department will be taking Chapter 44 out to the public and Chapter 35 out to the public anyway. And we are on track to bring those to you in July. So we'll start the process next month. And so we could take proposals, include any proposals that you would like to see in those, take them to the public, get the input, and come to you in July with those if you wish. Anyway.
Other thoughts or questions about that? Yes, sir.
I agree with you, Madam President. I think that's the way to do it. And I really, really would like the input of the groups that make this happen. You know, what do you see? What do you think? What's practical? What's not practical? Your input is going to be critical to figuring this out. I want to be fair, like you. Where's the balance? That's the question. So, thank you.
Sure.
The one thing I saw was the one person that had 20 hunts. That's, if in fact there's a waiting list, that's, to me, I don't care who they are, that's just wrong. So that would be something that would really need to be looked into. Thank you.
Madam President, if I may?
Sure.
I would nominate Commissioner Masterson to head the committee of writing that language for that, but
I'm deeply flattered, but I don't write, I rewrite, I criticize.
Thank you for the
rewrite.
correction.
You realize you just gave him his own committee, right?
That was informal, sorry. But thank you for this presentation, Chief Miller, and I'm fascinated by these numbers. I like to see the numbers. I've participated in volunteering for these types of programs. Some of my family members have donated licenses that have been transferred to to veterans, and I was able to guide them. And I've also, as an outfitter, helped with disabled and internally ill children, taking them on hunts. For the volunteers, I can say it's extremely therapeutic to be able to participate in this and help people. I think it's an extremely valuable program. And I'm glad that it is here. It probably should have come along a long time ago, but I'm glad that it is here. And because it is very beneficial to not only those that are recipients, but those of us that help and volunteer. So I'm grateful for that. And I too want to echo Commissioner Robertson's sentiments of maybe expanding it and extending it to whether it be retired or injured or disabled first responders. And I know the approach that we've got to take with that through the legislature. But, you know, I come from a family. My father was career law enforcement and military. I have brothers that were at the proverbial tip of the spear in special operations in the military. And because they're my family members, I can say they were probably disabled beforehand, but they certainly they certainly have suffered the effects of that. And I know that there's something that you can't put a price tag on. You can't take a pill for it, but sitting around and sharing a campfire with people and just having conversations, it's extremely therapeutic and healing. And I would like to see opportunities for that to expand and grow and just help as many people as we can. So thank you for all of this hard work.
All the credit goes to the people sitting back there.
Anything else on that section? So it sounds like I'm hearing consensus that we would like to direct the department as they're looking at these things next month in order to prepare for the July meeting. So look into that specifically once in a lifetime tags, the idea of getting multiple of those and seeing what the public has to say about it and maybe getting some more information about that. Is that what I'm hearing from everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you also interested in the limiting the people that might get 20 so you could have fewer?
Let's look into all of it. I'd
Okay.
like to hear from the public on all of it. So
Okay.
like I said, I know that it's not as heavily abused with the deer and antelope and elk and things like that, but and people that are not disabled and don't get these donated licenses can get multiple. I also know a lot of the times it's, you know, dad comes in with son and things like that, and it's like, here's this, oh, and here's this, and match them up, and it's done that way, and I get that as well. But I would also be interested to know, I know it has to be sponsored by an organization. How easy is it for people to become an organization in order to then turn around and donate a license to someone? I'm not talking about the list of the guys that were up here. These are all legit nonprofits that are doing their thing. But from what I'm hearing from other folks, it's my understanding that it's pretty easy for Joe Blow on the street to become an organization. Sorry, you were next to me.
On my name.
And then donate, you know, to dad or brothers or anything like that. Do you have any information on that at all?
I don't. I know that we have seen more organizations, and there are some organizations who do not have a large program. I didn't look to see if it's the same handful of people that get a license from them every year. And then you have to go through the 501c3 Secretary of State get established
Sure.
process, and I can't speak to how hard that is, but
It's
we
Easier
have
than you think.
we have seen a proliferation of people, and we have seen people who have received licenses from one organization and then have switched to a different organization. I can't tell you if it's an organization that they created. I have heard similar stories that some folks have just created their own organization to facilitate the
The donation
process.
licenses, yeah. Again, very small group, but they're still finding ways around things. So I think that's the first part of it, the donated license program. So if we could get some more information on those things we specifically talked about, as well as I'd love to hear more from the public about that. I think that's the consensus. All right,
Thank you.
and let's tackle the second part, because this is where it's going to get fun. And I want to preface this by saying that across the country and all the different places that I've worked with no one treats disabled hunters and disabled veterans as good as Wyoming does. I love the programs that we have. I love the understanding within the department that true healing does come in the outdoors, whether you're a veteran or a civilian. And the programs that we have and the abilities that we have to get people outdoors, whether it's hunting or through fishing or other things. I'm so proud of Wyoming for all of the programs that we have. Not just saying that as someone who has been able to be a part of those programs, but just working with other organizations and seeing the thousands upon thousands of people that have been blessed through these. And so total kudos to the department and all of the folks that continue to work through these. I was involved at the very beginning with Mike. I'm probably part of the reason why Mike retired, because we had a lot of conversations. We would start out with these wonderful intentions about getting people out in the field, and then we'd have to almost come back to it every year and be like, oh, we forgot those people, and oh, we forgot about amputees. And so I know the intent and how it started specifically with the 5-day early tag. What we were seeing happen before this tag was put in place was, let's just keep it easy. Let's say there was a September 1 opener, and everyone would get into the field. We're civilians, veterans, disabled, able-bodied, everybody would get out there. And obviously, veteran or civilian with a physical disability, we're not the sneakiest, we're not the stealthiest, we're not the quickest, we're a little slower. We usually have equipment that's not super quiet and things like that. And so what was happening was, by the time we were able to get out into the field to be successful in a harvest, all the animals were blown out. They were up in the places where without a helicopter, there was no way you were getting to them and things like that. So we started kicking around this idea of what if we could let some people with a physical disability go in 5 days early, and then it would give them, a little bit more of a level playing ground to order to have a successful harvest. And so when we did that, and we did 100% disabled with our veterans, PTSD wasn't even on the map. No one understood. It was there, but no one understood it. It had 15 different names, and it wasn't being studied and understood like it is now. And so we always wanted that to be specifically for people, civilian or veteran, with physical disabilities that weren't able to physically get out and do those things 5 days early. That's why we did that. So I understand that some people aren't hearing from them as much, but I am inundated from game wardens, biologists, the public, and things like that about folks that are running into people, and they're saying the word abuse, and technically they're legally doing what the regulation states, so I don't want to use that word. But I will say that it's mostly veterans that have 100% service-related disability because of PTSD, and God knows that they're definitely struggling with what that entails. But it's not a physical disability that's not allowing them to get out there with everyone else that's able to. And so we've got guys that are, from a physical standpoint, able to hike out into the thoroughfare and up into the mountains and things like that. And I've got wardens and biologists calling me, and they're like, these guys are out 5 days early. It doesn't seem to fit the original intent of the regulation. And I agree. They're following it exactly like it's supposed to. So I went on a little mission, started talking to some of my vet buddies, and a lot of them were like, well, yeah, that's what the regulation says. So of course we're going to do that. They understand they're not breaking any laws, but if that's what the regulation says, that's what they're going to do. So I started asking some of them, how many of you would actually need to do that? And they were like, we don't need to do that, but it's the regulation. So we're going to be able to, use that. And I know I just talked to a few. I know there's some that might speak differently, but I'd be very interested to hear from the commission as well as anyone else in the public. The original intent, and I know because I was a part of it, was for people with physical disabilities, whether they were veterans or civilians. If we were to take out the part that says 100% service-related disability, we're not discluding all veterans. We're just saying you would have to meet the requirements that civilians have to meet, which is when the wheelchair and physical disabilities come into place. So again, I know anytime we talk about taking something away from veterans, that's not popular at first. And I'm certainly not, I don't want to get into this battle about what is deserved. If we were giving these men and women what they deserve, none of us would have tags. They would have all of them. So it's not that at all. I feel like the donated program is more like a very minimal thank you for your service kind of a situation. Whereas this regulation was never meant to be that. It was always meant to level the playing ground for those, civilian or otherwise, with physical disabilities. So I say all of that to say, questions, comments, thoughts from the commission as well as the public on that.
Madam President, I agree with you.
Well, that was quick.
Madam President, I think it's worth the discussion, and as you point out, what we originally write and intend, circumstances change, facts change, the world around what we write changes, and then also people figure out sometimes not with the best of intentions, ways to work things. So I think it's worth the discussion and the conversation and the input from the people who put these programs together and make them work, and get your input and see what you think.
And Bill, I actually do have a follow-up question for you as well. Because you mentioned something that I have not heard yet. And that was, you spoke specifically about a hunt in Casper, I think, that you're saying if you don't have the 5-day extension, the hunt wouldn't be possible. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes, so our, Madam President, Commissioners, our Casper chapter, their hunt specifically revolves around that 5-day season extension. So they're exclusively taking 100% disabled veterans. And you know, there's other caveats to that, with nuances to that with landowners and outfitters and such, but does that kind of answer your
Just,
question?
I guess what I'm asking is, let's say, for instance, that 100% service-related disability were to come off the table,
Mhm.
but it still read that whether it was a civilian or a veteran, if they had the physical disability requirements where they couldn't get out, they could still get the 5-day early permit. How would that then affect your ability to do your hunt?
Actually, like, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of 100% disabled veterans, if you remove that line out of there, they're not going to meet those qualifications that are currently in regulation. So there's a lot of like Colton Sasser, who's an amputee, he would not qualify for that. His back is fused, he's missing the leg. I mean, he would no longer qualify for that. So it's going to drastically reduce the amount of veterans that we can take on the season extension.
Right, so take it a step farther for me then. We're not saying they couldn't hunt. We're just saying it wouldn't be 5 days early.
Correct.
So then why-
And where that affects us in Casper would be the landowners that we have got on board and the outfitters we have on board. They allow us because of the early season. So if we didn't have access during the early season, we would probably lose quite a bit of access.
Okay.
And one of the key things to that hunt that one of the fellows from our Casper chapter, he mentioned the most value they get out of that is that they're not pressured. The animals aren't pressured. There's not people running around everywhere. I mean, Casper is one of our largest cities. So opening season for antelope, which this is an antelope hunt, it just adds a whole other layer to trying to get a veteran out. And I do want to say the intent was for physically disabled, but think of it through this lens. As over time, you know, our country's been in different conflicts, military conflicts. The soldiers coming back from those, the injuries look different. The injuries that they have sustained during our recent conflicts are not always visible, but not only that, our medical advancements have allowed those veterans to not be wheelchair bound or other things like that. You just don't necessarily see it. Like if Colton walked in the room, other than a slight limp, you wouldn't know that he was missing a leg. So the value, and I can't stress this enough, the veteran that I've taken that are 100% disabled that can walk, that doesn't mean they can walk in there like you or me. They got to work really hard at it. I took an elk hunter that's 100% disabled. He was one of the ones I described. And in 2 days, we walked probably 8 miles, and it wasn't easy on him. And it was, he had like a severe TBI and some other broken bones and such. But it's the benefit of having them out there when there's not other people and they're not pressured. I mean, just because they're not physically disabled doesn't mean it's not challenging for them. It just, I understand where you're coming from. But I think maybe the way to do this is more self-policing within the organizations. This program just blew up exponentially from when it started. There's a handful of donated licenses. Now we're at thousands of licenses. And I did want to touch on something Commissioner Jolovich said. So to receive a donated license, you have to be sponsored by a nonprofit. So there's kind of two groups of hunters. There's the hunters that we take with our Hunting with Heroes folks, and we guide them and we take them through the whole process. But then there's members of the public who say their grandpa donates them a license every year. That's how you get to some of those, oh, they've had 15 licenses or 20 licenses. That's why you see some of that. Well, they still need a nonprofit to sponsor them. And because Hunting with Heroes has been around and we process we have a package that we put together that we hand deliver to Game and Fish just to make it easier on the licensed folks. So we're kind of the go-to for that. But so there's two groups of people. One that, hey, we just process it, we sponsor them. We have no idea what they do after that. But it's perceived as abuse when somebody has multiple licenses, but I'd sure hate to take that opportunity away. I think it needs to be self-policed within the organizations. And one example I have, there's a Vietnam vet in Casper who is slowly dying from Agent Orange exposure. And it's just a matter of time. And he has developed a really close relationship with a landowner and one of our chapter folks in Casper. And our chapter, his name's Judson. He said, I will take that vet as long as he's able. And so he goes every year on an antelope hunt. So it's not always how it seems on paper. And not everybody that comes to us wants to be on our list, on our waiting list. We have a database actually going back to 2011. I was going to joke with the license folks, if they need that data, it's actually not in it's electronic format right now, but we go all the way back to 2011. We have all that data. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Other question?
Thank you.
I saw movement, which means I think we have some other gentlemen that would like to speak. Yes, sir.
I genuinely hate standing up and speaking. I am 100% disabled veteran. I got blown up a bunch of times. I did 3 tours in Iraq as a combat medic. But you would have no idea looking at me if I was or wasn't. If you saw me in the woods, you would have no idea. I had multiple injuries. I get dizzy, but if you see me in the field, you'll be like, oh, this guy's perfectly fine. I would say that just to say that you're not going to see a lot of the injuries that are plaguing the veterans. And Bill was absolutely right. A lot of the landowner access my organization has because it's 5 days early. And PTSD, I understand that's not the initial concern. But you get a lot of guys who are skittish about being out there with other people. And that's just one way to look at it. When it comes to the multiple licenses, 20 is probably excessive. But my organization, we take in veterans to take them hunting, and we screen them with an antelope hunt. If they want to go on an elk hunt, we'll say, hi, come on in. We'll put them with a guide. The guide will evaluate them, and then usually the guide will take them on the elk hunt. So that's 2 licenses right there. Rarely in the same year, but it happens. And then, I had one guy who was named Tim Williams. He earned the Silver Star in Afghanistan, which is 2 levels below the Medal of Honor. And he got 3 licenses last year. And in my opinion, he absolutely deserves it. He's got 2 Purple Hearts from one go out. But if you see him, he looks just like us, maybe a little more stacked. He's very big on the bench. Anyway, that's just something to take into consideration. Thank you.
I have a question for you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
So 2 things, and just help me and us understand. What would be your response then to, and again, we're talking about a very small group of folks here.
Of course.
Maybe those that are 100% disabled by the VA.
Yeah.
That are up and hiking 5 days early and things like that. Do you see where or I guess if you were back here, how would
Right.
you deal with the ones that are then, again, not abusing it because it's legal the way that we have it written,
Right.
but where we have that concern of those that are?
How many licenses were issued for the 500 licenses total were issued last year?
For the 5-day early season extension.
That's a very small amount, isn't it? And even if it's 50% of the people who could hunt at the same time, you're still talking 250. And I know the number's probably much higher than that, but you're still talking 250. Wyoming is huge and it's generous and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. I moved here because of these hunting programs. I live here because of these hunting programs. So I would say if your original intent was to screen them out based on physical disability, you're running into a slippery slope of defining what the physical disability is. I have traumatic brain injury. How do you define that? Where does that fall? I don't have an amputation. I've definitely got a Humvee blown up from underneath me and it crunched the right side of my body. So I have a bad shoulder, bad hip, but how do you know? You know, I'm not disabled 100% because I have a bad hip or a bad ankle. I'm disabled because of the traumatic brain injury. So it's a slippery slope of trying to dictate what disability is that you would guide that by. And I would say with the very minimal amount of hunters that are doing this, I'd probably let it go personally.
And then just to clarify, you said with your organization that there are landowners as well as outfitters that would not help or at all on the hunts if there weren't for the fight. Like they're saying,
I have
you can't come in
landowners.
5 days early, we're out kind of a situation.
No, not necessarily, but I have landowners that have outfitters on their land. And we have an agreement that the 5 days early hunters can only hunt that area based off of the availability to the outfitters. So if the outfitters are making money, which they should be doing, having veterans running around in trucks with guides is going to disrupt that. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Other questions?
Anybody else have anything I can answer?
Madam President, I do have one comment.
Sure.
I have no interest in doing away with the 5 days. As I said, I don't even want to even go into that. I'm not going to say that, you know, one knucklehead goes up and 5 days early that shouldn't deserve is going to mess it up for everybody else. I'm of the opinion that I like the 5 days. It'll be tough to change my mind on that. And that I think it's obviously just therapeutic to the point where it's invaluable for us to do. So I'm totally closed out, but I just don't want to burn up a whole bunch of energy where I would say, So anyway, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Madam President, I'd like to speak to, as a expert on mental health, I'd like to speak to the 5-day and how post-traumatic stress or traumatic stress is best served, or how it could be triggered in a competitive environment. In the public arena, hunting has become very competitive, and competition tends to lead to hostilities. Would you guys agree? Yeah, I've seen it. I'm out there in the field quite a bit, at boat ramps, gator hunting in Florida, to out here trying to get a vet on an elk where other people are intersecting, right? It is very tough to access the frontal lobe whenever they're in fight or flight. And the idea behind the whole 5-day for those with traumatic stress that meet that disability requirement, it allows us to break down those barriers of having a bunch of orange or a bunch of archery hunters out there and competing against each other, or we're stepping on each other with elk calls or whatever the case may be, right? And there's some times out there where people throw fists, and it's not healthy for those who are struggling with that. I'd like to touch about the repetitive abuse of habitual retreaters, what we call them, or professional veterans. We've seen this quite a bit in our 13 years. And what we've done was we created a solution to that, a membership program. It's completely free, but it helps vet out those veterans, and it helps us sow seed into fertile ground versus giving a bunch of handouts to somebody who's not ready for healing. And what we do is we partner with other organizations to bind together these members, and we keep track of how many programs they attend, what how they behave at the events, because some are just not very nice. And we want to make sure that they're held accountable, because that's one thing our society in America has lost: personal accountability. And in order for us to heal, we need to take responsibility for our own health and wellness and not give it to the responsibility of the doctors or the psychologists or even us as leaders. We have to own it. And you guys are granting that opportunity, especially with those with traumatic stress, and giving us access to a non-competitive environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Madam President, I did want to, when Mr. Grillo asked a question about the season extensions, it's the number of donated veterans. He mentioned like 500. But there are 2,500 people who have the season extension permit. So there are many people who buy their own licenses and have a season extension permit that are not affiliated, that haven't gone through these programs. So just wanted to clarify that's a difference.
Oh, I mean, it needs to be said too, this is certainly not a civilian versus veteran thing. I know civilians that are like, well, I got an ingrown toenail, and they get a doctor to sign off on their disabled hunting permit. And then I'm mad at the doctor too. So I mean, it's certainly not something that's just a one group. People are always going to find a way around things that want a way around it. But I just, as someone that was there at the beginning, I really like to see us doing whatever we can to keep those as pure as possible and to the intent of which they were originally constructed. So I guess my question would be then, I love hearing from the public. Obviously, we had on the agenda that we were going to talk about donated licenses. We didn't really maybe broadcast that we were going to open up some more things in chapter 35. From the commission, and obviously I want to get input from everyone else, would it be possible I know what we're going to be doing, going to the public next month, and then eventually opening some of these other things up as well? Because once we open some of these chapters, we want to try to get as much done while we're in there as we can. Would it be possible to hear from other parts of the public, from different organizations and just the public in general about this 5-day early extension? Just to see, I want to hear from people, and I want to get the full kind of answer from everyone. Would that be something that the commission would be okay with?
Absolutely.
Just gathering more information in that regard.
Madam President, my experience is that if you make a change that people are interested in, you get input.
We will get the input.
And
Yes,
so
that's very true.
if you want to propose to change some of those qualifications for a disabled hunter or a season extension permit, that will be the mechanism by which we receive input, and then we can bring that to you, and certainly the gentleman here, and we'll engage with the other folks and try to get the word out to people if you're interested in that.
Contrary to popular belief, we like to hear from people. And so, yeah, I think that would be, if the commission's on board, would be a great way to just open the discussion so that we can get more comments, so that if the time does come, we would be more educated on how to make a decision.
Mission received.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you. And thank you so much for all of the input from the public as well. We appreciate that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we have one more. It's like, oh, I could sit down. I'll be up there tomorrow. All right, we have one more formal public comment before we open it up for anyone else. Jess? Speaking of awesome organizations and programs, tell us about More Than Gatherers and what you guys have been up to, what we've been up to the past couple of years.
President, Commissioners, Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I'm the Government Affairs Director. And this is a bit of a personal project that I'm bringing forward, because in all of the work I do in politics and policy, we all need the bright lights at the end that bring us the joy that keeps us into the politics and policy. And what that was, and what it ended up for me, was More Than Gatherers. And it's a women's hunter's education course that goes far beyond what hunter's education was, much leaning into the conversation you guys actually had yesterday. But this project and program would not have happened without the support of the department, the support of Commissioner Lundvall, the support of the women involved. And so this is just, I didn't want to ask for an agenda item. It didn't need to take that much time. I have a short 3-minute video to show you. This is just a thank you. And this is a bright light for the work going on and for the women out there that are getting into the hunting world. And it's a thank you to the Commissioner Lundvall, to all of you, and to the department, because the department has gone above and beyond in a partnership here. And they have listened to my incessant questions. They have donated the Whiskey Conservation Camp weekend that we get there. And there are no words for what this has meant for the women that have been part of this program. 40 women have gone through it right now. And I can tell you that the best part of my season this year was getting 10 different text messages with harvests and smiles and stories. The recruitment and the retention that this program has is incredible. One of the other things that we saw is the women that took the first year, many of them, more than half of them, came back and helped teach the second year. Our thing here is you don't have to know everything. You just have to know a little more than the person you're working with. And it's to get people out and to build community. So the one question I have is, your wizard in the back, Wayne, is going to try and get this video to work. He said that the audio's a little odd. So to make sure that we have all of our microphones off, because he's going to use the microphone itself at his computer. I'd had a lot of women in the last couple of years reach out to me that were hunting curious and basically said, like, I want to get into this, but I'm worried about taking hunter's education with a bunch of like 12-year-old little boys, which is really fair. You know, we have a great hunter's education in this state, but there's a diversity of ages and a lot of them are young men. More Than Gatherers came together actually at like a personal dinner that I had with some friends. And so we had a long discussion, and by the end of this dinner, this idea had surfaced that was like, what if we had an all women's built hunter's education for adult women who would do that? And I think by the end of it, the three of us kind of made eye contact and said, why the hell not? Why can't we? As we started to build More Than Gatherers, the curriculum, the agenda, how it's going to go, a couple of the things that came out that was really important was the need to sort of build a women's-based experience for hunting that is built around the concerns and maybe the desire to dive deeper into some parts of hunting that don't always get touched in the general programs of Hunter's Ed. This could be anything from, you know, philosophical discussions about sort of what is hunting and how we interact with it. This can be food discussions. We decided that we were going to include a full butchering section of More Than Gatherers that I think has always been lacking in a lot of other education around hunting, to make it so that the women feel safe to ask the silly questions, to approach this with a learning mindset rather than feeling like they have to perform and show up and know everything to start with.
I love opportunities where we can take it a step further than just your normal hunter's education. We can talk to the women about what goes on after, what goes on before, and how they can continue this lifestyle. And that's so vitally important because we want the lifestyle of hunting and fishing and conservation to be passed on to the next generation. Most people will talk about how women are the fastest growing population in firearm sales and the hunting community and things like that. But what a lot of people don't realize is if you have a dad that hunts in the family, you have some chance that the kids are going to get involved. But if you get mom and you get her involved in hunting and in the outdoors, you're almost always going to get the entire family involved. And so that's why I love pursuing women and mentoring them and educating them and encouraging them to get outdoors and live this lifestyle, because you know you're going to get the whole family and you're going to get that next generation at the same time.
One of the main things that I think that came out of this is that in R3 work, which is recruitment, retention, and reactivation, we're actually missing an R, and that R is responsibility or reciprocity. And it's this idea of a program built around 4 R's, not 3. So we bring people in, we keep people there, we build a community, but we also tie it back to the very thing that keeps this community going, which is the natural resources, the wildlife, and the landscape around us. More Than Gatherers 2025!
Yes. Okay, I'm ready. set, go. I've got everything right now, but go for it.
So I just wanted to end this saying thank you, because the kind of lives that get changed through hunting, a lot of these women, you'll see them at Camo at the Capitol. They're getting involved with other conservation organizations. This didn't happen in a vacuum, and this didn't happen solo. And it's a movement that we're starting to see have really profound effects, because that the statistic that Commissioner Lundvall talked about in there, it's a real one, that if you get the mom, you get the whole family. And so we look at this as not just recruitment and retention for women, we look at it for youth as well. In fact, the first year we held it, one of the students was a breastfeeding mother who brought her infant there. So we try and make it really welcoming, really wonderful, and it's so joyful. So I just wanted to say thank you, and the work that's going on here that you guys support and that comes out of the department is pretty profound.
All right. Anything else from the public while we're here? Anything online? Anything else from the commission? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for all the input, and we will see everyone April.